Well. Clemson Tiger fans, college football fans, welcome back to another episode of the All In Show here on the Voice of College Football Clemson channel. Thank you so much for joining me. I, as always, am your host, Tiger Paul Craven. My boy Jordan Bowman is in the back. He will be joining us momentarily. But before we bring him on, if you have not already liked the video and you're in this live chat right now, please go ahead, hit that like button for us. It really helps us out on these live videos. Thank you so much. We are trying to grow this channel as always. So if you are not subscribed, if you think you're subscribed, go check. And if you're not, please subscribe. Share it in all your Clemson groups. Share it in all your college football groups. Help us out. Help us grow this channel. We bring you this live show, me and Jordan Bowman, every week, every Thursday at 7 p.m. We are right here to talk college football, Clemson football, and everything in between. And guess what, people? The off season is over. Can you believe it? The off season is over. We are into game prep. It is so exciting. Me and Jordan got a great show coming for you guys tonight. We are going to be doing the Clemson season preview. We'll be going game by game on the schedule, giving you our final preseason prediction for this Clemson team, talking about various position groups, talking about various games. We will break it all down right here tonight. So please stay tuned. Hit that like button. Hit that subscribe button if you have not already. And without further ado, I'm going to bring on my co-host, my buddy, Jordan Bowman. Jordan, how you doing tonight, man?
Doing awesome, man. I'm shocked. There's 15 people in here, considering Dabo was on the roar right now with William Qualkenbush and Walt Deptula over at Mellow Mushroom right now. So
that's crazy.
Thank you guys for tuning in. Really, I mean,
thank you so much.
It's awesome because it sucks I'm missing out on that, but I wouldn't miss it for the world. This show for the world, at least. So, thank you guys, and glad to be here. Off season is pretty much over.
Off season is over, man. Off season is over. We're in the game prep. Clemson has turned the page. We are on to Duke, Blue Devils game prep. The wheels are turning. The 2023 season is finally here, and I could not be more excited. I got my Clemson football shirt on tonight. I know you got your Clemson football shirt on as well. We are ready to rock and roll. Man, I cannot wait for another college football season, man.
Me neither, man. And we're 2 days away from actually seeing football kicking off with week 0. No, there's not a whole lot of not a whole lot of exciting matchups on Saturday, but it's always this time of year where it's like we don't really care. We just want to see college football teams going at it. And
it's been so long, it doesn't matter at this point.
Right. And you can really feel it. I mean, first day of classes for Clemson was yesterday, so it's that's how the season is here.
Yeah, the season is upon us. Fall camp is in the books. All the scrimmages are in the books. Off-season workouts, off-season training, all the stuff, transfer portal, all that stuff is null and void. The conference expansion, all that nonsense is finally in the past. We may touch on it a little bit here during this show, but not very much, because guess what? It is college football season, and we will be watching live college football games this weekend. That's amazing. We won't be watching our Clemson Tigers, but I guarantee you I'll be tuning into college football this weekend. I cannot freaking wait, man. I cannot wait. Shout out to the comment section. As you mentioned before, I cannot believe we have 15 people in here right now. They could be watching Dabo, and they might be watching Dabo and us both at the same time. But regardless of whether they're doing that or not, I appreciate their view. And we're going to give a shout out to the comment section before we get into tonight's show. So first up, WB2DX, thank you for getting into the chat first. He says, hey, Tiger Paul and Jordan, thank you for coming in, man. We really do appreciate it. He says, at me, do you think we will get back to being wide receiver U this year? We sure need to. I don't know if we'll be wide receiver U this year, but I think we will be much improved at the wide receiver position. I don't know if I'm going to go as far as to say we're wide receiver U. Maybe you could talk more about that, Jordan, but I do think that this wide receiver room has not lacked talent the past 2 years. I don't think talent has been Clemson's issue at wide receiver. It's been injury and it's been poor play, both by the wide receivers and the quarterback for the last 2 seasons. What do you think, Jordan?
Yeah, 100%. I mean, when you say wide receiver, that especially when in the context of Clemson, that brings back memories of
that's some names, dude. That's some
and,
names.
Yeah, Sammy Watkins, Justin Ross, T. Higgins, Mike Williams. Funny story about Mike Williams came out this week. I guess we can touch on that. I put out a tweet. It blew my mind about his recruitment. But the names that Clemson has had in the past at wide receiver, I don't think Clemson is going to get back to that this season. But I do think that what we really want to see is the wide receivers being a strength. I think there's a clear difference between being wide receiver U and just being completely elite at the skill positions versus the wide receivers are very good and they're a strength of this team and they're a tough matchup for anybody. I think Clemson can certainly get back to the latter, and so that's definitely what we're looking to see. And I think the talent is there to be that for the wide receivers to be a strength of this offense. So. But again, you have to see it. A lot of some unproven guys, some guys that flashed and showed their potential last year, but not a whole lot of truly like known commodities. So that's what we're waiting to see.
Absolutely, man. Steel Gamble gets in, says missed this show last week because I had my first MMA fight.
Wow.
Okay. I hear.
That's cool.
I'm here now, and go Tigers. Shout out to you, man. I hope you won your first MMA fight, and best of luck to you in future fights, man. That's pretty hardcore. I'm not trying to do that, but shout out to you, dude. I wish you all the best.
I did do karate when I was little, but
yeah, for sure.
I did not.
Maybe a fight here or there growing up, but no professional fighting. So shout out to you, Steel Gamble, man. That's pretty awesome. John Sarian, our regular in here, said, can't believe I'm so desperate for college football. I'm getting excited to watch Notre Dame, Navy, Vandy, Hawaii. It'll probably be bro. You know what's funny about your comment, John, is me and Jordan literally just had the same conversation backstage before we went live today. About how excited we are about week 0 and Navy and Notre Dame and so on and so forth. So it's pretty funny that you mentioned that. We are much like you, sir, which is why we hang around YouTube and college football YouTube for the entire offseason like a bunch of degenerate college football fans. But you got to love us because we are the most loyal that there are.
I'm a degenerate gambler too, so I might be putting a little skin in one of those games.
All right.
Who knows?
Jordan's gambling on the channel. There we go. Tricksters 2.0 is in here. Only 11 days. Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
That's my guy. So close. That's my guy Brady. Shout out to Brady.
Shout out to Brady. So close, man. We are right there. It's right around the corner. Donald Walker says, I think the ACC doesn't give Cade Klubnik any respect because he's not ranked in any of the quarterback rankings. What you think about that, Jordan?
Well, I mean, I guess it depends on where you look. I still think at the end of the day, Cade Klubnik has played. He started one game in his career. We saw him in sparse action at multiple points last season. And he had some really good moments. He had some really bad moments. And so at the end of the day, it's, we know how talented he is. Clemson faithful knows how talented he is. The recruiting industry knows how talented he is. But, at the end of the day, you got to show it on the field. And that's still something that we have to see. Does the marriage of him and Garrett Riley, prove to be fruitful? That's something we got to see.
And that's the end of the day is I'm not sure it's any disrespect to Cade, but there's more proven guys in the ACC other than Cade Klubnik.
Yeah, and I saw John mention it. The betting market is all over Cade. He's one of the tops in the Heisman. They're pretty bullish on his chances of being really successful in this offense. So
right, because look, at the end of the day, you can look at Cade's albeit high school record, but he did play in the highest league in Texas football, in one of the most competitive leagues, if not the most competitive league in the country for high school football, and he dominated. So, but that's really all we have to go off of. He's not a proven college quarterback like some of these other ACC dudes. So I get that he's ranked behind them. At the end of the day, it's all on him. If he goes out there and proves it on the field, best believe he will be in front of every single one of those dudes come year end, come trophy time, come award season time. Cade Klubnik will be on top of all those dudes if we think this season goes the way that we think it's going to go, and this team's aspirations are realized. So we'll see how it goes, but not to worry right now. Steel Gamble gets in the chat. He doesn't have anybody of work yet. Yeah, kind of like we were just saying. John Sarian, again, not me, is in here. Thank you for stopping in. Go Tigers, as always. Always a great day to be a Clemson Tiger. Show Out Gaming. I would like for y'all to cover the 2024 commits, high school games from the past week. Heard our guys are really did their thing on the field. Sammy, Izzo, and to name a few. Okay. We'll see what we can do there. Jamarius Payne, thank you for getting in here. Let's see. Did I miss anybody? Huffer Billy Paul.
Hey, shout out to Huffer Billy.
Shout out to Helfer Billy. Thank you so much for getting in here. What's up?
I said HBP. Oh, I did want to. Jeremiah, so he had a second. He said, I don't know if it's me, but one thing I noticed is South Carolina produces some of the best wide receiver prospects I've ever seen. I mean, look what's happened with Clemson and in South Carolina. Yeah, I mean, if you go down like the names, like, man, like even the ones that didn't go to Clemson or South Carolina, like AJ Green.
AJ Green, yep.
I think
long career in the NFL.
Cordell Patterson was from Rock Hill.
Yep.
I mean, shoot, Adam Humphreys. Well, he was Clemson, but you can go through the list: DeAndre Hopkins, Mike Williams, Deebo Samuel, Hunter Renfrow.
Yep.
I mean, Alshon Jeffrey. Like, it's a pretty crazy the list of guys that have come out of here. Bruce Ellington, Martavis Bryant. It really is when you think about it. Yeah, South Carolina is the skill talent that the state of South Carolina has put out has been pretty incredible.
Yeah, I think I don't know if South Carolina gets enough respect for the high school prospects that they really do produce. Maybe they don't produce them at the same volume as some of the other states, but there's definitely some quality high school talent in the state of South Carolina for sure.
Absolutely. Yeah. It really is wild the names that when you actually go and look, it's pretty wild.
Yeah, for sure.
Which is why I always think it's like, hey, if I'm going to bet on an in-state kid, at wide receiver, you got to feel pretty good. And Clemson did that with Tyler Brown this past cycle, and they've done that a bunch over the years. And South Carolina's done the same. They've had really good success with South Carolina-born skill talent. So,
Absolutely.
keeping those guys home is really big. I mean, you just saw Jalen Hyatt win the Blitnikoff last year from Dutch Fork. So
That's true. Yeah.
at Tennessee.
Absolutely.
So
Yeah.
he never got a Clemson or South Carolina offer. So it makes you think. But I know he was, when he was coming out, I think when he was coming out, the knock on him was his size, and he was he was fast, but extremely light. I think he was like 160 pounds, like soaking wet. When he came out of high school, but Tennessee did a good job of molding him, and now he's turning heads in with the Giants right now. So, but
Crazy,
keeping those
man.
guys home is a big deal.
That's crazy. That is crazy. Tons of talent for Clemson to target in the state of South Carolina for sure.
All right, I think that's.
I think that's everybody. Yeah, that's
I'm ready
everybody.
to dive into the schedule.
Let's do it. Let's do it.
All right. Let me see if it'll let me add it. I have the screen up. How we looking?
Looking good.
Awesome. It hasn't destroyed my computer yet. So
there we go.
We'll see how this goes.
We love to see it.
But yep, got the 2023 Clemson football schedule here. Really, really, just from a bird's eye view, this is I wouldn't say it's a difficult schedule by any means, but I do think there are some landmines on this schedule that are kind of reminiscent of some older Clemson schedules and not, the last couple of seasons. And I think Clemson is going to have to navigate those well, and it's going to take some. Obviously, the offense has to gel, and it has to. You don't really get a whole lot of time to break it in with this first game coming up.
Absolutely, yeah.
But it's important that you don't trip over yourselves. Just over the entire course of this schedule. But yeah, let's dive into this Duke game. Well, we'll not dive in. We'll dive into it more next week. But let's kind of give a short preview and kind of how we're feeling about that game.
I got you. Absolutely, let's do it. All right, I'll go first. The Duke Blue Devils. Look, there's been a lot of talk about the Duke game heading into the 2023 season. Everybody knows this is going to be a standalone game on Labor Day night. What is that? September 4th, Labor Day night. It's going to be a standalone game. All eyes are going to be on Clemson for a couple of reasons. One, Clemson's got a new offensive coordinator by the name of Garrett Riley. If you haven't heard of that guy, apparently you've been living under a rock for the past, 6 months, right? Because it's been the talk of college football. Dabo Swinney fired first-year offensive coordinator Brandon Streeter, brought in Garrett Riley as the offensive coordinator to completely revamp Clemson's system that had become stale, monotonous, predictable, unimaginative. Use all the adjectives you want to create to really describe Clemson's offense the past two seasons. Really, all that you need to know is that it was bad and it was hard to watch, right? So Garrett Riley comes in. We got first-year starter Cade Klubnik. Yes, did he start the bowl game? Did it go well? Absolutely not. It went absolutely terrible. He was under duress for most of the night. Clemson moved the ball extremely well until they got in the red zone, and then they couldn't move the ball at all. They drove the ball a bunch of yards, and they put up almost no points. So it's kind of a mixed bag with Cade Klubnik as far as playing the bulk of the snaps. He did completely destroy a very bad defense in North Carolina, and then he struggled against a defense in Tennessee, right? So there's a lot of question marks coming for this Clemson team, and all eyes are going to be focused on them game one. But let me tell you, Clemson has some guys. They got some dudes, and it starts up front for me on the offensive line. I think Tristan Lay is going to develop into a really good left tackle. I think he's going to fill that hole that Jordan McFadden left when he went to the NFL last offseason, right? And then we got four other starters. If Tristan Lay can push into that left tackle position, the other four starters are returning, including center Will Putnam, who will be calling a lot more protections this year. Kind of a fifth-year COVID guy, second year snapping the ball. Never really snapped the ball before he got to Clemson, but second year snapping the ball, has a great understanding of the offense, has a great feel for different defenses, has played in college for a long time. So it really starts up front for Clemson, and I think they can lean on the running game because of that offensive line. And not to mention our backfield, right? We got, I don't know if you've ever heard of them. We got guys like Will Shipley and Phil Maffa in the running back room, right? We also got some other guys behind him that a lot of people in the country haven't heard of, but I guarantee you by the end of the season, their names are a lot more known than they are now, even with the guys like Phil Maffa and Will Shipley in the backfield. So I think that's a strength heading into the Duke game. What else I think is a strength is our defense. We got the best linebacker duo heading into college football for the 2023 season, in my opinion. You can say I'm wearing orange color shades if you want. That is completely fine. I still believe we have the best linebacker duo heading into college football for the 2023 season, and that is, Barrett Carter and what's his name?
Jeremiah Trotter Jr.
Jeremiah Trotter. Thank you very much. Barrett Carter and Jeremiah Trotter, right? We have a ton of secondary experience returning this year. Last year, secondary was a big concern for Clemson. One, because we had a ton of injuries to our more veteran guys, and we had to play a lot of true freshmen like Toriano Pride and other guys along the secondary. But guess what? Those guys grew up. They got valuable snaps. Did it help us in the moment last year? No. But does it help us as far as a depth chart goes this year? Absolutely. Because all of those guys that got hurt, all those veteran guys returned. So we got a bunch of veteran guys in the secondary, and then we got all those true freshmen that are now sophomores that are sitting behind them, ready to take on reps. The one question for the defense is obviously the defensive end, but I do believe that XT Xavier Thomas is going to have an absolute breakout season. I think he's going to have a contract season. He's going to the NFL in a very big way. He's going to be talked about when it comes to the NFL draft based off of what he does this season for Clemson. If you look at the guy, he's in the best shape of his career. He's absolutely dominating according to Dabo Swinney when it comes to fall camp. And he's poised and positioned to have his greatest season since his freshman season. Remember back to XT, man, this dude was a three and done type of guy, right? But at the end of the day, it didn't work out that way. Injuries, sicknesses, various things that college athletes go through, right? It didn't work out that way. But he is definitely poised to have a breakout season. And the speed on that guy, the size and the speed alone is something that keeps quarterbacks awake at night. So I think you lean on the defense, you lean on that running game, you let that passing game and those receivers come along a little slower. They don't have to be elite in week one, I don't think, to beat this Duke team. Although this is not your Duke of old. This is not, 45-13 type of Duke team, right? This is a Duke team that can absolutely compete. They are very confident, and they will come punch you in the face. And Clemson is going to have to play a really good football game in order to beat this Duke team. However, I think talent and the new scheme on offense and the renewed energy around Clemson football is plenty enough to get through week one Duke, although they are receiving plenty of hype heading into the 2023 season.
Yeah, I mean, I got to agree with you. I mean, and this is an opportunity for this team to to really make a statement. I do think Duke is, yes, they bring back a ton of experience. Most of the offense is back. They brought back pretty much everybody on the defensive line. I do think they lost one of their top receivers, I think, to injury in camp. So I do think that's kind of a big loss. But other than that, this Duke team is extremely experienced. You mentioned the lines of scrimmage, and I do think Clemson should have the advantage, and I think that's where the game will be won. But something that kind of has been flying under the radar, I do think, and I want to give a shout out to my guy Dustin Black. He does film breakdowns over at Clemson Sports Media. He pointed out that that Duke's secondary is extremely small. Like, they are not very big on the back end. Not a lot of size there. I think their biggest player is 200 pounds. Right at 200 pounds. One of their safeties is 5'8". They don't have a ton of size there, and not great length either. They were a very poor pass defense last year. They gave, I believe they were in the close to the hundreds in pass defense. They gave up a lot of explosive pass plays, and I think that sets up well. I think that with the size that Clemson should have, between Adam Randall and Bo Collins, and even Antonio Williams is 6 foot. Jake Brenningstool at tight end is going to be a matchup problem for them as well. I do think there are some matchups that can be exploited in the passing game, and I do think if Clemson is able to establish a run game, especially, it'll make those matchups even more apparent. And I also want to point out that this is a really good opportunity to see whether or not this wide receiver room has bought into blocking. That's something that Clemson fans have been frustrated with the past, however many seasons. It's been a long time since we've seen the Clemson wide receivers really be adept at blocking and willing to block. Well, this is your opportunity. You are physically more imposing than the corners and safeties that you're going to be going up against. So if they haven't bought in, it's going to be really apparent. If they're not winning their blocks, if they're not being physical in their blocks in the run game, I think that's going to be telling of kind of what the mentality is, because the Clemson wide receiver rooms of old, they used to take pride in it. Sharon Peak and Artavis Scott, those guys were phenomenal blockers. They were really good receivers and good pass catching options, but they made it a statement. They treated blocking almost as important as it was catching the football. When we haven't seen that. We've seen players here or there that were pretty good blockers. Cornell Powell, I thought, was a really good blocker before he really had his breakout season, and that's why they put him out there. But that mentality has not been within the entire room in a long time. So this is a really good opportunity for Clemson to really impose their will in a lot of facets. And I think that's important. And but I think this Duke team, I think this is actually a pretty favorable matchup for Clemson offensively. Now, I do think on the defensive side of the ball, it's going to be interesting to see kind of how they choose to defend Riley Leonard. A lot of that running offense, runs through him. Really talented quarterback. A lot of NFL scouts see him as a legit prospect. He's got a good arm talent, and he's really athletic. He runs. He's not a burner, but he's a physical runner. He's fast enough, and he can make things difficult for you when you're trying to defend the pass and the run. So this is going to be a tough test for Clemson defensively, and I do think it's going to stress the linebackers, and I do think the edge rushers are going to be paramount as well. They do a lot of stretch and outside runs, and a lot of zone reads. You're going to have to be disciplined. You can't over pursue, and that makes things difficult. So I do think this is a really good test for Clemson in this opening matchup.
Yeah, and look, I think Clemson wins this game. Obviously, look, as I said before, no disrespect to the Duke Blue Devils. I think they are a very good team. I think they're going to have a good season. Mike Elko has done a great job there at Duke turning this program around. However, Clemson is just too much, and I think Clemson wins by probably 2 touchdowns, at least against the Duke Blue Devils. If I had to guess today.
I'm kind of with you. I do think this is a game that you could see Clemson, kind of come out slow out of the gate.
Mm-hmm.
It's just kind of unreasonable to expect this team to just go out there and just put up 50 points like it's nothing, even
Right.
against with this is the first game of a completely new offense,
Right.
and a new starting quarterback.
Yeah, at the end of the day, look, you got a new starting quarterback, you got a new offensive coordinator, completely new scheme on offense, and you're starting with conference play against a foe that had probably their best season in what, a decade last year. So, it's not the easiest game of the year to start with. I'm not sitting here pretending like Duke is like we're opening up with Georgia. However, it's also a conference game, and it's not the easiest game to open up with. So, I think it's unfair to put on the Clemson to have a flawless game, both offensively or defensively, regardless of what side of the football you're talking about. However, I do think they will win at the end somewhat comfortably.
I'm with you. I think this is a game that Clemson will. I don't think Clemson will be in danger of losing at any point. But I do think it's going to be. They're going to get. Duke is going to take their shots, and Clemson may have some struggles at points. But I do think this is a game that Clemson will win up front, first and foremost. And I do think that the physicality of the run game is going to be too much for Duke. And I think Clemson will hit on enough explosive plays to kind of break the game open and win comfortably. I'm feeling, as far as a score, I feel sort of like 35-17, something like that.
Yeah, I think that's fair.
I think the defense, plays well for the most part, and I think the offense does enough, and it's a pretty good start.
Mm-hmm.
I do think the run game will be the main driving factor for that result. So, yeah, 35-17. That's kind of where I feel. I do think Clemson can cover, and I think they will cover. I think the line's only at like 12.5, 13, depending on where you look.
Yeah.
So
it's not a typical Clemson Duke line. If you were to think about these two teams traditionally, as far as the ACC goes. So,
All right. I think that's enough of Duke. Clemson is 1-0, coming back to their first home game of the year against Charleston Southern, in-state Charleston Southern. This is an interesting game. I don't want to spend too much time on them because I don't want this to be a 3-hour long show of us, deliberately breaking down Charleston Southern and Florida Atlantic. But Charleston Southern is an interesting team. They do run a sort of a spread triple option type of offense. It can be difficult to defend at times. It's not exactly what they do at Coastal, but it's kind of similar. They do have some similarities. It's a more modernized version of the option, and it can be difficult to defend. But I do think Clemson, obviously, this should be a game that they take care of pretty easily.
Right.
Score prediction, I'm feeling something like a 45-7, something like that. That's kind of what I feel.
Yeah, I'm there with you. Look, at the end of the day, do they present some new things schematically? Sure. But look, Clemson far out talents a school like Charleston Southern. Clemson kind of does these games. They're kind of money games for the smaller schools in the state of South Carolina. But at the end of the day, this should not be a game at all. However, in the past couple of years, these have not necessarily been the easiest games for our Clemson Tigers. We remember back to last season, right? And probably maybe it's our still, it might still be our most watched live post game reaction with La Tech, right?
Yeah,
Um,
that one still blows my mind that many people watch that one.
Yeah, we had like 8 or 9 thousand people watch our Law Tech post game breakdown of the Clemson game, and that was not the most comfortable game for our Clemson Tigers, right? So, um, but I do think, look, Clemson's got far more talent than Charleston Southern. It's not really going to be a game. It's really a game to get some guys some real game reps. That's what it should be for this team. If we think if this team is who we think they are, right? It should be an opportunity to get some younger guys some real game experience. And that's all this game should be.
Yep, yeah, my mic was off. Yep, I agree. I think it should be an easy kind of tune-up game.
Yep.
Take what you learned about yourself from the Duke game. Kind of work on your
Work on some
weaknesses.
things.
Get some
Absolutely.
yeah, get some guys, get some young guys in, work them in, and get ready for next week. Against this is still not a great opponent, but this is a opponent that is trying to improve. They have a new head coach, Tom Herman, is taken over at Florida Atlantic. Taken over for, I think Willie Taggart was there before. we Clemson fans remember him. He gave us
you want to
the
ask the
that
Florida
was
State fan
59 to
about
10.
him?
Yeah. Yeah. I definitely, we definitely don't have, we definitely have more fond memories of Willie Taggart than Florida State fans do.
Oh yeah, for sure. I love Willie Taggart. I don't know why Florida State fired him.
Yeah, no, me neither.
I have no idea why.
But in all seriousness, Willie Taggart makes his return to Memorial Stadium with not Willie Taggart, Tom Herman,
Yes.
comes to Memorial Stadium.
Mm-hmm.
The team that was pretty bad last year. They have not been very good the past few seasons.
No.
This should be another tune-up game.
Mm-hmm.
I know that, I think Tom Herman at this level of football, I think that was a really big hire for them, and they're clearly trying to invest more in football. But again, this should be this is not a roster that is particularly in good shape right now. I can definitely see them being a tough out in a couple of seasons, though. I do think Tom Herman, when he's not at Texas, is actually a pretty competent head coach, especially at that level. He's a good evaluator. His offenses have been pretty good. At most places he's been. So I do think this could be a really good hire for them. But again, I think Clemson should handle this one pretty easily. I'm feeling, I don't know. I mean, the score predictions are kind of arbitrary, but
right now they're arbitrary. We'll get more into those in the game by game breakdown each week.
I'll say 54. No, 54 feels wrong. 52-3.
Okay, I got you. Look, this is not going to be a very competitive football game. At least it shouldn't. This should be, like you said, another tune-up game for our Clemson Tigers, getting ready for the Florida State Seminoles coming into town the very next week. Now, with that can come a couple question marks, right? Will Clemson be looking forward to FSU? Will they come out sluggish against a team like Florida Atlantic? I do think that's possible. I could see that happening. Now that contradicts the focus and the rhetoric that we've seen come out of Clemson this fall camp from both players and coaches. They seem to be locked in. They seem to be ready to take one game at a time. They seem to be ready to really dominate the season. They are looking to win every game this season. And look, I know every team every year is looking to win every game of every season, but if you know Clemson football and you're watching them this offseason and you're hearing player interviews and you're hearing coach interviews, it's a little bit different this year. And if it really is a little bit different this year when you hear them talk. I haven't heard a Clemson team talk quite this way before, and it's really interesting and it's really motivating to me. It's really exciting as a fan to hear the team talk this way, and I have to assume they're hearing it from the coaches and the staff at Clemson. So if I had to guess a score prediction for Florida Atlantic, I would expect for our defense to absolutely dominate this team because they honestly, they really have no business competing with this defense or this Clemson team as a whole. No disrespect to Florida Atlantic. It just is what it is. I would go 42-0 in the Clemson's first defensive shutout of the season. And we are 3-0 at this point, heading into the last game of September.
My mic was muted. Of course, I always do that. But yeah, I like the score prediction. I typically don't predict shutouts, so that's dope. But yeah,
All right, I lied. The next to last game of September. My bad.
Yeah. Oh yeah. I don't know why I don't know why I kind of thought Florida State was the last game of September too, but I guess
I did too. Like I said that and I didn't even look at it, and then I was looking at the screen for a second. I was like, oh wait, hold up. That's September. That's September 30th with Syracuse. So
I just I don't even think like September I always think of September as really short, so I'm just like, oh, that's
right.
The last.
Yeah.
In the 20s, I'm like, oh, this is the last week of the month, but I forget it actually does have 30 days. Believe it or not, man, my math is bad. But no, but in all seriousness, this is the game, arguably the biggest game of the year. You've had 4 weeks or 3 weeks. To really get yourself together, work out the kinks. You're 3-0. Florida State coming into Death Valley in what could possibly be a top 10 matchup, depending on kind of what shakes out in their game in week 1 against LSU. But either way, they're bringing a really talented team. They are a team that is looking to overtake Clemson as far as the ACC pecking order is concerned, and kind of retake that top spot. So I mean, this is the game that I think Clemson has circled, and they're going to be a game that they're going to be preparing for through those first 3 weeks. I don't know. What do you think about this game and kind of
look?
This is magnitude.
I honestly, I'm going to try to keep it a little bit shorter, but I have a lot to say about this game. I've heard a lot of sports writers, podcasters, mainstream media guys types talk about this game, about both the Florida State team and the Clemson team. I have a lot to say about it. One thing to highlight is the narrative going into this game is basically transfer portal versus non-transfer portal. That's kind of the mainstream media's take on this game. And it's not that it bothers me, but I just think like it's kind of lazy and you're kind of not doing your homework, right? I saw Josh Pate, which I think he has a great show. He gives great insight. He's a great interviewer of coaches, and he's got way more connections than we do, obviously, in the sports world. But he talked about how this game will come down to basically what I just talked about, transfer portal versus non-transfer portal, and each fan base will scream about the other based off of what happens in this game. And although I think there's some truth in that, I also think Clemson has not necessarily embraced the transfer portal like a lot of other teams. But when people are using this past offseason as an example of Clemson not using the transfer portal, that's where they lose me. And it's the fact that Clemson didn't have any scholarships. If anybody followed Clemson this offseason, we were over the scholarship limit for majority of the offseason. So what were we supposed to pursue the transfer portal with? What scholarship were we supposed to offer people? Right. So that's one of the things heading into this. It's really building up to this game. I really think it's going to be transfer portal versus traditional building of a college football program. I think you're going to see transfer portal over here, traditional building of a college football program through high school recruiting over here. That's really what the mainstream media is going to focus on. But diving deeper into it, Florida State's going to be a great team, an absolutely great team, if they can mesh all those pieces together. And that really is the question for Florida State heading into this season, and specifically heading into this game. Can they get over the Clemson hump? Because at the end of the day, Clemson owns the ACC. It just is what it is. It's not because I'm a Clemson fan. Look, they've won 7 of the last 8 ACC championships. That team owns the conference, regardless of whether I'm a fan of them or not, which I happen to be. But that team owns the conference, right? So you really do have to go out there and prove it on the field. And that's what Florida State's going to have to do. They have a great running back returning. They have a great receiving core. They have a great quarterback. They have a great defense pieces returning, right? They are replacing some pieces along the offensive line. But overall, they have a really great team returning. But guess what? So does Clemson. And at the end of the day, I really do think Clemson is just better than Florida State. I know a lot of people are going to disagree with me, and that's fine. If you want to disagree with me, I completely could hear an argument where Florida State is better roster for roster than Clemson. I do think it is somewhat close, but at the end of the day, I just trust Clemson guys better, and I trust development. And I do think Clemson has a more developmental program right now than Florida State does. And maybe that's out of necessity, right? Mike Norvell doesn't have a choice. He has to go to the transfer portal. He's got to rebuild a team quick, fast, and in a hurry, or he's not going to have a job soon, right? Whereas Dabo Swinney's got a luxury, right? He can go to high school. He can develop players. He can do things like that. So I do think that Clemson is, in my opinion, if outside looking in, I have no knowledge of the inner workings of either of these programs. I know you see the Clemson hat. I don't have any inward knowledge of the workings of Clemson's program either, right? But I trust that developmental piece that Clemson has. I trust what I'm hearing out of the players coming out of fall camp and the competitiveness between the offense and the defense and the fiery practices that we've heard talked about in the media. And I think this Clemson team is just different, and they're ready. And I don't think Florida State comes into Death Valley, which I believe Clemson will be 3-0 at that point. And that stadium is going to be absolutely rocking. ESPN Game Day is probably going to be there. It's probably going to be a night game, and it's going to be an absolute insane environment. I don't think Clemson loses that game. That's just my opinion. I don't think Florida State can get it done in that environment. They may prove me wrong, but that's kind of where I'm at.
Yeah, and I think you raised a lot of great points. Obviously, the narratives in this game are going to be tenfold. There's a bunch. But, from a matchup standpoint, when I look at Florida State's roster, I think they do have a phenomenal starting 22. I think they have really, really good pieces on both sides of the ball. Starts with quarterback. I think Jordan Travis has certainly taken strides over the years, and he's become a really, truly good dual threat quarterback. He's improved a ton as a passer. He was always really athletic, a great runner. And I think this is great. I think when you look at this roster, though, I do still question kind of the depth that they have in certain areas. What happens when a Fabian Lovett goes down, or
Right.
what happens if Jared Verse or Pat Payton were to go down? Um,
Right.
do they have the pieces at those key spots to come in and fill in? I do think there's still some questions there. I know a lot's been made about the blue chip ratio and stuff like that. I think Clemson's sitting at around 72%, and Florida State is at I think like low 40s. Um, I think the Florida State fan will say, well, I'm not really too worried about that because it takes into account recruiting rankings. But I do think it is a good measure of kind of the quality of your roster and the depth that you have specifically. And I still think there's some question marks for Florida State. Um, so I do think if they're coming in, I think they have a starting 22 that matches up really well against Clemson, and they have a lot of really interesting pieces. Wide receivers going to be a really good strength for them. They're probably one of the best in the country. Between Johnny Wilson and Keon Coleman, and some of the other guys that are Ketron Poitier, or however I think I pronounced that right.
Yeah.
A lot of guys that they're going to be relying on that have real, legit talent. But in other spots, I think defensively they aren't the deepest. I think safety is a concern for them. It's been a concern for them the past couple of years, and now that Jamie Robinson isn't there, I do think that makes it even more in paramount. So I think that Clemson is the deeper team. I think the starting 22 are very comparable, but I do think Clemson, from a depth perspective, is going to be the deeper team, and I think that's going to be what ultimately wins out when you have to take a guy out and sub in somebody else. I think Clemson is going to be deeper at more spots, and that's kind of where I think the difference is, and I think it's going to be a tight, competitive game.
Mm-hmm.
I'm feeling Clemson. I'm feeling Clemson 30, Florida State 27. I think Clemson. I think the spread is roughly about a field goal. I think Clemson wins by about that much. That's kind of where I'm feeling.
Yeah, I could see that. I could see, like I don't know, like a 35-31 type game with Florida State Clemson. I do think it's going to be close. Like any Florida State fan watching it right now or watching this clip back, I'm really not trying to disrespect Florida State at all. I really do think they're going to be a quality team. And I want them to be a good team in the ACC because I'm sick of every year hearing about how Clemson just beats up on bad teams and goes to the playoff, right? So I do want there to be quality depth within the ACC. I want there to be tests for Clemson along the way. But I just don't like. I agree with you. I don't think comparing position group for position group, if you go down the roster, I just think Clemson is too much for this Florida State team. I just think they are. This Clemson defense is going to be a problem this season, in my opinion. I think a lot of people are looking at last year's defense. They're looking at how we struggled against the pass mightily, and that's a valid point. That did happen. We did struggle against the pass quite a bit last season. And part of that was injury. But again, every college football team in the country deals with injury. So I get that argument as well. But I just think this season's going to be different. One, because we have all of those guys that were injured last year back. Two, we got guys that if they get injured again are a year better and a year more experienced because they had to go out there as freshmen and they had to put in real snaps in real games that actually mattered last year. So our two deep is battle tested versus just our two deep is talented. We can actually say we've seen what our two deep in the secondary does on the field, and it's pretty good. It was pretty good as freshmen, and I can only assume that they got better in this offseason and in summer workouts and in fall camp, and then obviously heading into the 2023 season. So for all of those reasons that we just talked about, I do think Clemson gets it done against the Seminoles in Death Valley because that environment, I don't know if I'm going to be able to go to this game. I would really like to, but I might have to sell everything I own to get in the game. Honestly, because the ticket prices are out of control for this game. But I would absolutely love to go to it.
Absolutely. And I do think this is the biggest home game. I mean, Clemson has had since, man, um, obviously that 2016 Louisville game jumps out.
Yeah.
2017 Auburn ended up being a really big home game. That Auburn team was pretty good.
Notre Dame game,
Yeah.
the Hurricane game.
Yeah. I'm just trying to think of since those years. I don't think there's been a bigger game, home game than this one, at least on paper. And I was at the NC State game last year. That environment was absolutely incredible. That was probably the best home environment of the year.
Yeah.
And I think this game will exceed that. So yeah, I do think there's going to be a lot going against Florida State coming in. The atmosphere obviously is big, and John mentioned this will be the 10-year anniversary. I don't like to call it that because I associate the word anniversary with something positive, but
yeah, bro, that was a terrible game 10 years ago.
The 10-year anniversary of the 51-14 beatdown in 2013. I've seen some Florida State fans try to bring that up and talk about it. I'm like, you don't have as nearly as talented a team as you do now, as you did then, and Clemson is more talented now than they were back then, at least on paper. So I definitely don't expect something like that to happen.
Yeah.
But I mean, it's a game Florida State. It's a game absolutely Florida State can win. I don't think.
Oh yeah.
I don't think we're seeing a 51-14 type of game. But this is going to be a tough matchup. No doubts about it. No ifs, ands, buts about it. This is Mike Norvell has done a really good job throughout his coaching tenure of being using his personnel to the best of his ability and getting the most out of his guys. And he has a really good group of guys. And so that's going to stress things on both sides of the ball for Clemson. But I do think this is having the game at home. I think depth wins out. And I think Clemson will be able to hit some explosive plays in the passing game. And they haven't until they show they can stop Will Shipley. They haven't been able to do it the past two matchups.
They have not. And guess what? I think we're going to have an offensive coordinator that's going to rotate a guy called Phil Maffa in there too.
Yeah.
And I'm not sure the Florida State defense wants anything to do with that guy either.
He also had a big. I was at the Florida State game 2 years ago when Phil Maffa broke out off that big run. So yeah, this is a. I do think the run game for Clemson, honestly for both teams, is going to be paramount. But I do think that Florida State is going to have to show their ability to consistently stop it because they haven't been able to the past 2 years. So we'll see. But again, I'm feeling 30, Clemson 30, Florida State 27. That's kind of where I'm at. I think Clemson hit some explosive plays. I think both defenses have their moments. Both teams are going to score a decent amount, and Clemson wins by a field goal. Maybe a last second one. Who knows?
Maybe a 70-yarder from our boy Robert Gunn.
Yeah, could you imagine?
Like Dabo was talking about in his fall presser. Don't be surprised if we take a 70-yard field goal this year. Like, bro, if we line up from 70,
that's wild. Hopefully we're scoring more touchdowns than
Hopefully, if we line up from 70, for my blood pressure, it's like a blowout game, and we're just like doing it just because, to see if he can make it.
Yeah.
But outside of that, we better not be lining up from 70 for a game winner because I'm gonna have a heart attack, dude.
Dear God, I hope not.
It ain't gonna be good.
All right. Let's go ahead and move on. Clemson
Let's do
is,
it.
uh, according to our predictions, Clemson is currently 4-0,
4 and
heading
0.
uh, their their second road game of the year, or where we face a very familiar foe, the Syracuse Orange.
Oh man, the Syracuse Orange, dude. I love to talk about this game just because I've been to it recently more than I've been to any other Clemson game. Those of you that didn't know, like I used to live up in New York, and I went to the Clemson Syracuse game up there, and then immediately moved down here, and then went to the Clemson Syracuse game down here last season. Um, and it's always like not a clean game for Clemson, right? Like I've mentioned it probably more than anyone else wants to hear on this channel. But Syracuse got something over Clemson. I don't know what it is. Maybe we need Dino Babers to leave so that we can beat Syracuse like we should. But it's never a clean game. It's never a good game. It's never a game where you feel particularly comfortable. I remember last season, Cade Klubnik had to come in and actually win the game. Although he didn't throw us to a victory, we kind of ran to a victory. Still, it was kind of a game where he had to come in. And then I remember the game before that season. It was a nail biter in Syracuse, right? So it's never really a clean or easy game for Clemson when they play Syracuse. You can even harken back further to the the Kelly Bryant years, or even when when he went down and what's his name had to come in and throw
Hunter
that.
Johnson and Zary
Hunter
Cooper
Johnson,
both played
yeah,
in that game.
yeah, Hunter Johnson had to come in and throw that pass on fourth down. Like, it's just
You were talking about 2018. Okay, yeah, no, Chase
2018.
Bryce.
Yeah,
Chase
yeah,
Bryce.
Chase
Okay.
Bryce. Excuse me. Thank you. Chase Bryce came in, threw that pass in 2018 to literally save our season. It's just been always a series of like the most insane Hollywood writing scripted like victories against Syracuse, right? But they're never easy, they're never comfortable. And I do think it could be another game similar to that, especially coming off of a high of Florida State. If we do win that Florida State game, which me and you both expect Clemson to do, if we do win that Florida State game, coming off of that game, there could be sort of a lull for this team. And you're traveling all the way up to, Syracuse, New York. You're playing in the dome. It doesn't have AC for whatever reason, because people in New York are allergic to AC for whatever reason. I don't know why. Ask them. But anyway, there could be somewhat of a low there. Again, I'm not going to pick Clemson to lose this game against Syracuse, but I would not be surprised if this is not an easy game for our Clemson Tigers.
Yeah, I would agree. Syracuse is a team that did lose a good bit. A lot of important pieces from that. Really, a really important piece from off the offense, and a couple more, and then some really important pieces on defense as well. But they do bring back their quarterback Garrett Schrader. They lost their offensive coordinator Robert Anai. He took the job at NC State. But they still have Schrader. They still have Oronde Gadsden, that really big tight end wide receiver hybrid that Clemson was absolutely terrified of getting beat by. You could tell watching that game. They had him bracketed a bunch at times. Just did whatever they could to make sure he wasn't the one getting the ball. But they did lose Sean Tucker. Obviously, he's the biggest part of their offense the past couple of seasons. And they lost a lot of pieces on defense. They lost some guys on the defensive line. Jatius Greer, Garrett Williams went to the NFL. Juice Chestnut is he transferred. So they have lost a lot, especially in the secondary. And so this is a team that is kind of retooling again. And Dino Babers says, he's done what he could. It's been he's had a rough go of it at times, especially since that 10-win season. But for whatever reason, it doesn't matter whether Syracuse is good, whether they're undefeated going into the game or whether they're fighting for bowl eligibility. They give Clemson issues, and that's a testament to Dino Babers, and I think he's a better coach than maybe the industry seems to think he is. That's a tough job, and I think he's done about as well as you can ask for in most areas. But this game is going to be a game that Clemson should want to hopefully take care of business. But that's a team that's a team that's always difficult for this team to play. So it's kind of hard picking a score prediction. I do think Clemson will be good. They should take care of business on the lines. Defensive again, Syracuse is really undersized on the defensive line, and they also lost one of their tackles, Matthew Bergeron, to the NFL draft as well on offense. So I think this game should be a game that Clemson should try to establish the lines of scrimmage on both sides of the ball, and really right. I mean, they run a 3-3-5. Again, the undersized defensive linemen, you should be able to run the ball pretty effectively on them, and
Right.
I think that's what you should lean on in this game. But again, it's really tough predicting this game every year. I'm going to say, in a kind of a snooze fest, kind of a kind of a possible letdown spot after you beat Florida State. I'm going to go Clemson. Man, I'm going to go Clemson 31, Syracuse 14. Just kind of a whatever type game. You get in there, you come out with a win.
Yeah, I went 24-10 against Syracuse. I do obviously, I think they get it done against Syracuse. I don't think they have any business losing to that team, especially, all that you mentioned of what this Syracuse team lost this offseason via the transfer portal and things like that. But at the end of the day, look, it's never an easy game with Syracuse. So I went ahead and went with 24-10. And now our Clemson Tigers, according to me and Jordan Bowman, are at 5-0. 5-0 heading into the week before our bye week, which will be against the Wake Forest Demon Deacons.
Yep, Wake Forest, another familiar foe in the old Atlantic that no longer exists. A team Clemson has not suffered a loss to since 2008. It's been a long time. And that was the game that was Tommy Bowden's last game as Clemson head coach when he lost to Wake Forest. Wake Forest, obviously we know about Sam Hartman, departing for Notre Dame. They lose guys like A.T. Perry as well. This is a team that's kind of retooling. The defense has been kind of an issue for them the past few seasons. I expect it to be an issue again. They have some question marks on on the back end, especially. They typically have a guy or two on the defensive line, but on the back end they've consistently been poor, and I think they still have some concerns there. I think the strength of this team, I think, is again going to be the wide receivers, even with A.T. Perry gone. You saw the guys that were making plays last year against Clemson in that double overtime thriller. Jamal Banks, Donovan Green is actually out. I'll be interested to see whether he makes it back for this game. And that could be a big deal. And that could he was expected to be their number one guy. But they still have Jamal Banks, Keyshawn Williams, Taylor Moran. They have some really talented players still at wide receiver. So I think that's kind of what they're going to lean on. They're going to throw it all over the yard with Mitch Griffiths, a guy that's been in the program. This is his fourth year in the program. He's sat behind Sam Hartman all these years. I think he's going to be. I think he'll be good enough to make that offense work. I don't expect him to be Sam Hartman, but I do think he's good enough to get the ball to those playmakers and be really good. They also bring back the running back Justice Ellison. I think he's a pretty solid back. But offensive line, they never consistently had the guys to hold up against Clemson's defensive line. And I expect them. I expect Clemson to get after it more. I felt like a big reason why Wake Forest had so much success in that game last year was because Clemson kind of sat in their base defense. They didn't do what they typically do. What Brent Venables used to do was line up in a bare front and just kind of overload the line of scrimmage, and that blew up that slow mesh. But last year it was kind of Clemson kind of sat back in that base defense, and when the offensive line gave them time gave Sam Hartman time to throw, it left those young corners on islands, and they made a ton of big plays against with those big physical receivers that they had. So I do think Clemson is going to kind of. I think Wes Goodwin has kind of learned from that game. And I think you're going to see a little bit more aggressiveness from the Clemson defense in this game, and I think it's going to pay off. I think Clemson wins big. In Death Valley, Wake Forest I think they haven't won in Clemson since the early '90s.
Yeah. Well, I got some bad news for them. They're not winning in 2023 either.
Yeah, I don't think so either.
At the end of the day, with this game, I really do think this is kind of a revenge game for this Clemson defense. They got absolutely embarrassed. They got their doors blown off. They got handled by Sam Hartman. They got handled by this Wake Forest offense. They got made to look silly. They got made to look ridiculous. Although, Nate Wiggins made the play at the end of the game that was necessary to secure the win. He had probably the worst game of his career.
Almost definitely the worst game of his career.
Of his
by far.
Yeah. So I do think this is a revenge game for the Clemson defense, especially. I do think Wes Goodwin has this circled on his calendar. I think they are ready to repay the favor to these Demon Deacons when it comes to how this secondary was absolutely abused last season. I don't think it happens 2 years in a row. I think Clemson's defense absolutely dominates, and they go on to win maybe like 40-10 in a pretty good blowout win versus the Wake Forest Demon Deacons right before we head into our properly placed bye week right in the middle of the season.
Yep. I mean, you really can't ask for it. I mean, it's smack dab. Or you've played 6 games, exactly half of your schedule.
That's right.
Bye week.
Yeah.
So I guess thank the ACC scheduling gods for this one.
We appreciate it.
And it's a much needed bye week because I think this begins the toughest stretch on your schedule. Obviously, the first half has Florida State and Florida State, Duke, and you have some interesting games there. But obviously, I think the second half of the schedule is clearly the most interesting as far as the number of teams that could give you trouble. And obviously, you have a couple of teams that beat you last year on this part of the schedule.
Right.
So makes it all that more important. But coming off the bye week, you start going down to South Florida to take on Miami, team you played and handled pretty easily last year. First year, it was Mario Cristobal's first year. He went back to the drawing board after going 5-7. Fired his coordinator. Well, one of them left and fired the other one. And he's kind of retooled this entire thing heading into year 2. Tyler Van Dyke is back at quarterback. They brought in Shannon Dawson from Houston, and they brought in Lance Guidry from Marshall to run the defense. So Miami is a team that is really, really kind of they're kind of a question mark every year, but I think this year more so because they do have a really talented roster. I think they have some really interesting pieces on defense. The defensive line, I think, will actually be a strength for them. Led by guys like Akeem Mesidor and Leonard Taylor. Linebacker is still an issue. They have some really young DBs, but intriguing DBs. Cam Kitchens was an All-American last year at safety. James Williams is talented as well. And they have some young corners that they're high on, and they brought in a really good recruiting class.
Yeah.
This is a team that could be really good by this point of the season, or they could be the same old Miami. I really don't know what to think about this team. I do think that Clemson should win this game and should expect to win this game. But I think it very much depends on how they look offensively. I think Miami will actually be a pretty solid defensive team, but offensively is kind of more what I'm looking at. Does Tyler Van Dyke kind of find that magic he had in his redshirt freshman year? Do they have receivers step up? Can they establish a run game? Is the offensive line improved? I think it's improved. They brought in transfers on that front. They have true freshman 5-star tackle Francis Mauigoa, who's come in ready to play. Will be their starting left tackle as well. Or I think he's starting at right tackle. And it depends on Zion Nelson's health. But they think the offensive line is going to be much improved this year. Right. But at the end of the day, you got to see it. So this is a team that, even this close to the season, I really don't know what to think about. But I'm going to go Clemson. I think they win again. They kind of have Miami's number. They haven't shown to be competitive really the last few matchups. But I do think this might be their most talented team on paper that they've had in a good bit. So we'll see. But I think Clemson wins pretty handily. I'm going to go Clemson. I'm going to go Clemson 38, Miami 17. Okay. 38-20. I'll give them. I think Miami can get to 20. I'll say 38-20 Clemson.
All right. Yeah, absolutely. Before I get into Miami breakdown, you guys, we got 27 people in here right now. We got 18 likes. Help me out, guys. Please go ahead. If you're in here in the live chat right now, please go ahead and hit that like button for us. It really helps us out on these live videos. Again, we're trying to grow this channel. We're trying to bring you guys the best Clemson content we possibly can. So hit that like button, subscribe, and always we are here for you for all your Clemson breakdown and college football breakdown. But Miami, Jordan, is a super interesting team, man. I think they're, like you said, really up in the air. I think they could be good, but part of me still thinks they're probably a year away, right? I think Mario Cristobal is a good coach. He's obviously a coach that has been able to stockpile talent at Oregon. He's now stockpiling talent at Miami. But he's even talked about, guys not fitting the culture that he's trying to instill down there, right? Guys not buying into what he's trying to do down in Miami. So I think there's still a couple of those guys left. I don't think this is Miami's year, although I think they're a lot closer than they were last year. I don't think they're going to be nearly as bad as they were last season, especially on the offensive line. Now, quarterback is still a huge question mark for them. We'll see how that performs. A lot of positions are still a big question mark for Miami. I think they could be better than people think. But again, it's going to kind of be one of those things with Miami. They're going to have to prove it on the field. Nobody's really talking about Miami for the most part this offseason. Nobody's really believing in them as far as being a contender in either the ACC or definitely not the national landscape. But I do think they can be a little bit better than maybe people think. Mario Cristobal is a great coach. I expect them to be greatly improved along the offensive line, and we'll see. But again, I don't think they've never gotten to the level of a Clemson. This year is not going to be any different for the Miami Hurricanes, unfortunately for their fans. And I'm going with like a 35-10 type of score for that game. So we got our Clemson Tigers at 7-0. Coming out of the bye week and playing our first game against the Miami Hurricanes.
Yep, and that takes us to our second of back-to-back road trips. I feel like it's been a while since Clemson's had a back-to-back road stretch. in conference play, especially. But
and this could,
that's
but
part of what makes this tricky.
yeah, like you're about to get into, like if Miami does turn into be that team that we're talking about, way better than people or a little bit better than people anticipate, this could be a pretty tricky stretch for their Clemson Tigers, right? They come off of a bye week on the road to Miami, on the road to North Carolina State, and then at home, big game against Notre Dame. That could be a tricky little stretch for our Clemson Tigers.
It could. Let's talk about that NC State game. NC State is a team that I think is kind of been under. We talked about Miami and how they typically, it's all, the people have eyes on them whether they're good or bad, and it's sort of they were disappointing last year, but people are still going to watch and see how they do this year. I feel like the opposite is true with NC State. I feel like they're kind of being under talked about last year because they finally had those expectations last year and didn't exactly live up to them. They started the year top 10, went on the road and lost to Clemson in Death Valley. And that kind of effectively knocked them out of the race, for the ACC Atlantic. They dropped a few more games. But they were a team that was really injury riddled last year. I thought, between Devin Leary going out, they had guys go out on defense. I thought that was a team that kind of pulled it together towards the end, despite the rough go of it. They dropped some games that they probably didn't want to lose. The NC State game, the Syracuse game. I don't. Who did they beat? Florida State. That was the game I couldn't believe they had won. They dropped a couple of other ones. I think they lost to. Did they beat Duke or lose to them? That's the thing. Like as soon as Clemson,
I think they lost to Duke.
I forgot about them. I think you might be right. But they did beat North Carolina.
They did.
Pretty incredible. Beat North Carolina. They finished the season. They kind of held it together. They lost the bowl game to Maryland, but at that point, they were a really injury riddled team. But this year they've made some changes. Tim Beck goes to take the head coaching job at Coastal Carolina, and Dave Doran goes and gets Robert Anae from Syracuse, the guy that's well respected, has put together some really good offenses the past couple of seasons at both Syracuse and Virginia, and the quarterback he had at Virginia has come to NC State by the way of the transfer portal and Brennan Armstrong. So this team is kind of looking to. Is kind of looking to revamp on offense as well, kind of like Clemson.
Right.
They think they have the quarterback and they think they have the offensive coordinator to do it. Now, they had more issues last year than that. They weren't really a very good running team. They didn't have guys that could really separate at wide receiver. I think Trent Penix is a really good tight end, but he got hurt last year. So this is a team that still has a lot of question marks, but I do think that something that Robert Anae has done consistently in his career is, find ways to use his personnel in the best way possible. Right. You saw what he did last year with Garrett Schrader, the improvements he made as a passer. You saw at Virginia the year before when Brennan Armstrong put up all those numbers, and Virginia was one of the best passing offenses in the country.
Absolutely.
I think he could have that kind of impact on NC State. But it all depends on whether they have guys step up at the skill positions. They lost Demi Sumo Karingbe to the transfer portal, a running back that flashed a lot last year. Devin Carter, one of their lead wide receivers, he hit the transfer portal. So there's still a lot of question marks, but I think the defense is really solid. And I think that's kind of going to be the strength of this team again. They might have one of the best secondaries. People don't really talk about NC State's secondary, but they are a legit, really, really good secondary. Between guys like Aiden White and Shaheem Battle, they've got some guys, and they've been a really good pass defense the past couple of seasons. And they have Peyton Wilson coming back at linebacker. One of the best linebackers in the ACC that just doesn't really get talked about a whole bunch. He's got to stay healthy, though. So yeah, I think this NC State team on paper could be. They have the potential to be really good. It just and better than maybe people are giving them credit for, and that's kind of what makes this tricky. Uh, Carter Finley is a really tough place to play, and
Yeah, it
last time
is.
Clemson went up there, they took an L. So,
Mm-hmm.
um,
Yeah.
but I got to see it first. On the offensive side of the ball, they're going to be good on defense. With Tony Gibson, but running that defense, but offense, I still got to see it first. Brandon Armstrong should be an improvement. Um, over a injured Devin Leary, and hopefully, I shouldn't say hopefully. The hope for them is that they have better options as pass catchers.
Yeah, I'm going to be honest. I'm not a believer in North Carolina State. I'm really not. Dave Dorn has proved time and time again that he will repeatedly waste talent, and that he cannot get over the hump of the ACC and become a true competitor when it comes to competing for this conference. That may be the hater in me for Dave Dorn, but it is what it is. I do think at the end of the day, you are correct. This will be a defensive led team again in 2023. They were a very good defense last year. The same will be true this season. They had a great secondary. I don't expect any less. Their defensive line is always pretty good for North Carolina State, right? They're always able to rush the passer. They're always a pretty good defensive team as a whole, and they'll be the same in 2023. Their offense, like you stated, it's a huge question mark. They do have the potential to be really good on offense. You mentioned they got a Brandon Armstrong. They got his old OC. Can they rekindle that magic that they had at Virginia? Can he start slinging the ball all over the field? That remains to be seen. That's a huge question mark for this team. The receivers are going to have to step up. They're going to have to give them targets to run, to throw to. The offensive line is going to have to give them time, and we'll see what the play caller can do to kind of turn around that offense. Because really, at the end of the day, if you looked at North Carolina State, the past 3, 4, 5 years, right? That's really been their shortcoming. They've always had a pretty good defense, and their offense has always held them back. And a lot of it's been due to injuries. A lot of it's been due to poor execution at times. But they can't just ever seem to put it together as a complete team. I don't think that changes this season. I don't think they beat Clemson. I'll go with like maybe a 35-21 type of score for NC State versus Clemson. And to me, that puts Clemson at 8-0 for the 2023 season, heading into a big showdown with the Notre Dame Fighting Irish coming into Death Valley. Going to be an absolutely insane game, Jordan. Going to be an insane game.
Absolutely. Oh, I didn't give my score prediction for the NC
Oh,
State
I'm
guys.
sorry. Go
Well,
ahead.
no,
Go
that's
ahead.
on me because I should have given it when I finished talking, but the first time. But I do think this is going to be the game where I think Clemson's offense struggles the most. I feel like just because it's on the road, I think the pass defense for NC State could give them some really tough problems. I'm going to say I think Clemson wins the game, but I think it's kind of a more of a slugfest than you might think. I'm going to go 27-13 Clemson. They score enough. They put enough points on the board, and I think that the defense plays really well. Between the lack of pass catchers for NC State, I think they hang on. But Notre Dame that takes us into Notre Dame, the first or second biggest home game, depending on how you look at it, of the year. A team that has a lot of high expectations internally. I think a lot of people kind of peg Notre Dame after last season. They think they'll be really good with Sam Hartman coming in. It's like, but they maybe they could be a 9-10 win team.
Right.
But the thought from what I've gathered, I think the expectations internally from that fan base and from the staff themselves is like they think they have a college football playoff team.
Mm-hmm.
I think I see the pieces are there. I think Marcus Freeman has done a good job on the recruiting trail. The additions they've made and the transfer portal have been great. They've evaluated really well on the offensive line. They had some talented young players flash last year, even with the struggles. Um, this is going to be an important game for Clemson mentally. I think last year we know how the game went up in South Bend. You just kind of got pushed around up front, and you just couldn't muster much on offense,
No.
and it led to a pretty lopsided score. Um, I do think this team is in a much better shape. I think across the board, I think in most spots, I think Clemson will be a better team this year. But it's possible Notre Dame could be a better team. Um,
Yeah.
I think they have some questions up front on the defensive side of the ball, like who steps up at edge. They lost Isaiah Foskey to the NFL draft. He was a very productive guy coming off the edge. Um, I think they have some really good football players at linebacker, but the high end talent I don't really see. I think the strength of that defense is going to be their secondary between guys like Benjamin Morris and Cam Hart. I think those are guys that could be really, really good difference makers for them. But I think the improvement they really need to make, obviously, is on the offensive side of the ball.
Yeah.
The hope is that Sam Hartman, in this new offense with Tommy Rees off to Alabama, and Jared Parker taking over offense, play calling duties, that Sam Hartman really thrives in this offense. And they have guys that they think they have the guys at wide receiver to make those plays. We haven't seen it yet, but they have some interesting pieces. Tobias Merriweather, Jaden Thomas, Jaden Greathouse, true freshman wide receiver that Clemson, kind of courted, but never really didn't push hard for it. Kind of wish they did,
Right.
because he's already worked his way in there. They are still going to be, solid at tight end. Offensive line is going to be great. Audric Estime is back at running back. This is an offense that has some pieces, but it really is about, who kind of steps up there. They still have Chris Tyree, who's kind of moved into more of a slot receiver role. He was playing running back. And he was kind of a, he was their returner. He was a scat back. He was they used him as a true running back. And now he's kind of, he's going to be a big part of their receiving game. So there's a lot of pieces on this Notre Dame team that are interesting, and that's going to make this a really interesting matchup. And I think obviously it starts with the line of scrimmage. Picking this game has been kind of difficult for me. Because I do think that there is, I still have some questions. Does Clemson's defensive line show up? Because first and foremost, I think they have to show up. Yes, it's Sam Hartman. We've beaten him before. We know kind of what his strengths and weaknesses are.
Mm-hmm.
But he's in a new offense now. He's got a run game. He's got I don't think he has as good of receivers as he did at Wake Forest, but he has a lot more. He has a lot more complementary pieces. His defense is going to be more competent. All of that. I have a hard time picking. I think Clemson takes their first loss here. I don't think that's going to be a popular opinion, because the narrative is going to be that, hey, Clemson is, we lost them last year. They're going to be motivated. They're going to it's at home. All the revenge factor, all of that.
Yeah,
I think Clemson takes their first loss here. I think this is the only team on Clemson's schedule, I think, that can match them completely on the lines, and I think that's going to be. But I think that's going to be the difference. And I think it's going to be a tight, competitive game. I don't expect it to go like how last year did, but I don't know. I got to see Clemson, and maybe my opinion changes when this game rolls up. Maybe if the if the offensive line has shows to be a truly dominant unit, if the defensive line really shows out, my opinion could change. But this far out, I think Clemson takes their first loss here.
Absolutely. I could see where you're coming from, Jordan. Absolutely. You mentioned some great points about the Clemson Notre Dame game last season. We got, to put it bluntly, manhandled, embarrassed, destroyed. Whatever adjective you want to plug in there would be suitable for what happened to both the Clemson offense and the Clemson defense last year against the Notre Dame Fighting Irish. It was embarrassing. It was hard to watch. Jordan Bowman is a hater, apparently.
I'm the
But
biggest Clemson hater. Y'all know me.
yeah,
I can't
duh.
stand
I mean,
can't stand
that's
those
why I'm
things.
on here debating Jordan, because he's a Clemson hater. You guys didn't realize? No, I'm just kidding. But it was an embarrassing loss last year. Go no further than go back and watch me and Jordan's post game live reaction to that game. Actually, don't go back and watch that because it was terrible. We
Yeah,
were
no.
not happy. It was rough. It was not fun to do, but we were on here and we did it, and
I
we
sat in
swallowed our
silence
pride.
that whole game. I
Yeah,
was just staring
yeah.
at my screen. Like I didn't even yell. I didn't get angry. I just kind of
You kind of
it was
just
kind
at
of
a
just one of
certain
those things
point,
where you were just
you
watching
had
what
to
was unfolding and you were just like,
yeah, you just had to accept your fate. Like, you knew, like, okay, yeah, we're losing this game,
yeah.
right? And some of the people mentioned in the comment section about how defensive line coach Nick Eason went up to Dabo and was like, "You got to do something about this offense, right?" That's the infamous thing that happened in Notre Dame, and then you got various coaches defending DJ, and then people bashing Cade for his mistakes when he was put in really bad position. It was overall a terrible night for the Clemson Tigers when we went up to South Bend, Indiana, and played against the Notre Dame Fighting Irish. Right, it did not go well. It went about as bad as it could. The most surprising thing for the game, for me though, was the defensive line getting absolutely manhandled by that Notre Dame offensive line. And that was probably the most surprising thing to me that happened in that game. And part of it, I think, was the offense's lack of ability to move the ball, excuse me, or really generate any sort of momentum whatsoever. So it felt like the defense just kind of gave up. They were like, what's the point? Like, I'm tired of getting hit in the mouth by this 320-pound freaking offensive lineman over and over again when I know if we stop him, my offense isn't going to come out here and do anything. And is that the right answer? No, probably not. But you could understand the frustration coming from the defense. And I think that's what a lot of it was. If Clemson is going to lose a game thus far that we've talked about on this schedule, this is the game I believe they lose, if they lose a game. However, I'm not going to give it to Notre Dame. They're coming into Clemson. They're coming into Death Valley. This is probably going to be a night game as well. This is probably going to be a big game if Notre Dame holds up their end of the bargain and Clemson does as well. This could be, a top 10, we'll see, maybe even top 5 matchup. We'll see how the season goes, right? But it will be a big matchup for this week. I do think Clemson comes out on top. I do think this defense is hungry and ready. I think, and here's why I think that. Look, you got some veteran guys along this defensive line in Tyler Davis and Ruka Rororo and Barrett Carter and all these guys coming back, veteran guys, leadership guys coming back. Jeremiah Trotter, coming back this season. They remember how they felt walking off of that field that last season. They remember what was said about this defense last season, walking off from the Notre Dame game, about how they were manhandled, and that offensive line reestablished the line of scrimmage repeatedly on every single play in and play out, over and over again, right? But I also think our offensive line heard all that noise. And I think we're tired of hearing it. I think Notre Dame gets what's coming to them, and our Clemson Tigers come out in a close game, in a very close game. I'm not going to say it's going to be a repeat of the Hurricane game that we played against Notre Dame. Um, the infamous BYOG, bring your own guts interview. If you guys remember that, back when Dabo Swinney talked to the media immediately following that game as rain was falling down and wind was blowing sideways and all that kind of stuff. I'm not going to say it's going to be that epic of a game, but I do think it's a close game. And I think our Clemson Tigers prevail against the Notre Dame Fighting Irish. I got our Clemson Tigers at 9-0. You got them at 8-1.
Yep, our first disagreement on it wouldn't
like
be
I
a
said,
show if we just kind of agreed on every single game and just kind of
absolutely, yeah. It would not be a show. It would not be a show if we didn't disagree at least on one thing. That wasn't on purpose, but that just kind of naturally happened.
yeah. We didn't discuss this before the show at all, so neither one of us knew what we were picking.
Yeah.
All right. Let's move on.
Let's move on to Georgia
Clemson
Tech.
Clemson is either riding high or kind of licking its wounds. Thankfully, this game is also at home. So regardless, you don't have to travel or do anything like that. You're still within the confines of Death Valley. But yeah, Georgia Tech coming in. This is a game that's kind of sandwiched in between, arguably two bigger games. But this is kind of a team that I really don't know. Another team I kind of don't know, how to think about them because, Brent Key is officially the head coach now. His first year, they just named Haynes King as the starter. The transfer from Texas A&M. This is a team that lost some pieces, but also brought in some guys from the transfer portal. I think this roster is actually in better shape in some spots than people think. I think defensively, they have some interesting players and some talent there. I think they're going to be really good at safety. This is a team that could give Clemson issues. This was a kind of a competitive game for 2.5 quarters or so last year in that opener.
Yes.
You hope that this is a kind of a different story. But I think this is a game that Clemson has to take seriously. I don't think you're going to be able to sleepwalk through Georgia Tech. I think they very well could be a bowl team this year. I think they upgraded at quarterback. Not that I don't think that Haynes King is as talented as Jeff Sims, but I do think that he's going to fit this scheme a little bit better. They promoted Buster Faulkner, who did a really good job in various positions at other spots in other places like Georgia. I think they have some pieces. And I thought they brought in some guys from the transfer portal at receiver. This is a team that could be, sneakily kind of competent, which is what you haven't been able to say about Georgia Tech, at least in the Jeff Collins era. I think Brent, you saw kind of the immediate change when Brent Key took over as interim. I think that team has some belief in him. And they could be a tricky team, but I'm going to take Clemson. Obviously, I think this is a team that they should take care of business against. But it would not surprise me if Georgia Tech kind of hung around in this game longer than they should. I'm going to go Clemson. I'm going to go Clemson 40, Georgia Tech 17.
All right. Yeah. So Georgia Tech. Brent Key seems to be the guy at Georgia Tech, right? I get the feel from their fans. We know Sea Dog and various Georgia Tech guys on here, and Brent Key really does seem to be the guy according to that fan base. And if you saw, that team looked, they did a complete 180 when Brent Key took over versus when Jeff Collins was at the helm of that team. They looked like a completely different team. They looked energized. It was kind of reminiscent of, if you're a Clemson fan, right? DJ you starting the ACC game and then Cade Klubnik coming in. You saw how different Clemson looked. That was kind of Georgia Tech, right? When Brent Key took over. So I do think he's the right guy for the job. But again, I don't think it's as easy as year one as being a full time coach at Georgia Tech, no longer the interim. I don't think it's that easy to turn this program around. I do think it's going to take some work. It's going to be a process. But the benefit of that is that I think Georgia Tech will be patient, and I think they'll let Brent Key some latitude in building this program, which is what they should be doing. They need to find that right guy. They need to find that guy that can, take 3, 4, 5 years to build a program and build it right at a place like Georgia Tech, because it's not as easy as building a program at some other places, right? But again, as good as I think Brent Key proved himself to be last season, it's not going to be a year one full time coach turnaround type deal. It's going to take them some time before they're even mentioned as a competitive team in the ACC, I think, or competing at the level that Clemson is expected to compete at this season. So, for all of those reasons, I got a 28-3 Clemson victory against the Georgia Tech Yellow Jackets for a overall 10-0 record for the season, heading into the last two games of the season.
Yep. All right. And this is another big home game coming up. The rematch of the ACC championship game. The North Carolina Tar Heels come to town. Man, when is the last time they played in Death Valley?
I don't know. Honestly, I can't even remember. But another question outside.
Deshaun Watson's first start was against North Carolina, but I think that was on the road.
Yeah, I think that was in Chapel Hill, right?
Yeah.
Do you think Mac Brown knows who Cade Klubnik is now, or not? Do you think is he still trying to figure out who Cade Klubnik is?
I guess I would hope he does, but if they find a way to shut down Cade Klubnik, I mean, just throw in Hunter Helms. He doesn't prepare for the backup quarterback. He doesn't.
That's true.
He doesn't
That's true. If you look, if you ever find yourself heading into halftime, losing to North Carolina, just put in your backup quarterback. They have no idea who he is, and if he can complete a pass, he'll be just fine because their defense is terrible. So.
Yeah. But in all seriousness, yeah, North Carolina is an interesting team. They had some pieces. Oh no, okay. So that was a home game. Yeah, Steel Gamble says it was 2014. Okay.
Oh, okay. Right. Good.
I was like, I couldn't think of any other game. I was like, wait, it had to have been 2014. Yeah. But anyway, yeah. So it's still been a minute, almost 10 years, 9 years.
Yeah, that's a long time.
But yeah, North Carolina, they had a ton to replace offensively, skill talent wise. Obviously, the Antoine Green and Josh Downs are no longer there. They're two most important pass catchers. They brought in some transfers. Tez Walker from Kent State, Nate McCollum from Georgia Tech. Tez Walker will be interesting to see if he actually, plays. His waiver was denied, and so they're still going through the appeal process there. I tend to think I'm going to prepare. I'm going to talk about North Carolina as if Tez Walker is playing, and if he doesn't, I think that only helps Clemson because he's really good. But yeah, this is a team that we know how talented Drake May is. They recruit well at the skill positions. They're going to be really good on the skill positions, even with the departures. They have some interesting pieces at running back. They have British Brooks returning, who was out for the year last year, was expected to be their number one back, former walk-on. But they also have some blue chip guys, George Petway. Can't think of the other kid's name. But they have some talented pieces at running back. Tight end, I think they're going to be really good. Brian Nesbitt will be one of the best tight ends in the ACC. I think North Carolina is still going to have. I don't think they're going to have too many problems scoring points. I'm interested to see how the Chip Lindsey experiment works. He coming in as offensive coordinator. Phil Longo, their former OC, is now at Wisconsin. But I do think Drake May is still really good. That offense is still going to be pretty good, and they'll be able to score points. The question is the defense. It's always been the defense, and they were one of the worst defenses in the country last year, and they lost a lot of pieces from that defense. So I really don't know whether to think that North Carolina is going to be better defensively or worse. Is it an addition by subtraction thing, or are they going to be bad again? I really don't know. The Cedric Gray at linebacker is the lone bright spot really on that defense. He's really, really good. He's a really, really good player on a really bad defense. But outside of that, there's not a whole lot to be excited about. And I think you saw it last year. I think Clemson is going to have pretty easy time. I think this is a good matchup for them. Scoring points and moving the ball. I think Clemson wins, especially with this game at home and not a neutral site or road game. I think they handle this game pretty easily. They were able to shut down Drake May for the most part, make him make mistakes. I think they'll be able to do that again, and I think they win pretty comfortably. I'm going to say Clemson wins. I'm going to say I'll give them a little bit more credit offensively. I think they'll score more than 10 points this time around, but I'm going to go Clemson 40. I'm going to go Clemson 45, North Carolina 21.
Okay, awesome. Look, we all know what Drake May is. He's a Heisman Trophy candidate. We all know what we expect North Carolina's offense to be. Absolutely elite, put up a ton of points, and still get beat because their defense couldn't stop a nosebleed if they wanted to. I don't expect their defense to get any better. Look, I can't believe that North Carolina State, or excuse me, not North Carolina State, that North Carolina went into the offseason, looked at that defensive production from last year, look at all the offensive production they wasted, and was like, you know what? Let's run that back one more time. I cannot believe that was the decision that was made for UNC this offseason. I don't think they've gotten any better. They do have some good pieces on defense. Don't get me wrong. I'm not saying every person or every player that they have on defense is absolutely terrible. That's not what I'm saying at all. But I'm saying the collection of it and the scheme that they're running and the production on the field is absolutely terrible. I don't expect it to get very much better this season. I could be wrong. And if I am, cool. But I don't think that's the case. I don't think anyone's scared of North Carolina's defense. I think everyone's going to come in there and absolutely blow their doors off. And Drake May and the offense is going to be playing catch up or keep up the entire season, every single game that they play. You think back to their App State game last year. How many points did App State put up in like the fourth quarter? Like 40 points or something like that?
Something wild.
Yeah, something crazy. Wild like that. They still lost. But think about that. Think about your defense losing or giving up that many points, and you just got to keep going down and scoring. That's what I imagine Drake May's season being this year. I think he'll put up killer numbers. I think he'll be absolutely off the charts. He'll probably be, if not the first quarterback, probably the second quarterback drafted next season in the NFL draft. But guess what? That's not going to lead to very many North Carolina wins when you're dealing with a defense that is that unproductive and cannot get off the field. So for those reasons, I think Clemson wins somewhere around 42-21, 42-28, somewhere in there. Clemson's going to have their way with this defense once again, like they did in the ACC championship game in 2022.
Sounds good. And that takes us to the final game of the season. We all know what the final game of the season is every single year. This year is no different,
Mm.
but it is different. Then it's a little bit more different than it's been in a long time. Um, on the road at the other Carolina, the University of South Carolina Gamecocks. Uh, this is the team that beat you last year in a game that, you know, if you ask a lot of Clemson fans, you shouldn't have lost. A game where the issues that we had seen from Clemson over the past couple of seasons all kind of manifested themselves in a single game, and the frustrations that had garnered, especially from that year, really, really mounted.
Yep.
This is a game you have to win. This is if there's. I don't typically consider games must win. I don't like to do that typically, but I think while this is not the best team on your schedule, this is not the hardest game on your schedule. You've gone to Williams-Brice and won, and you've done it a lot of times. You have to win this game. I don't think this even if this team is, if this team is undefeated and with playoff aspirations, even if they lose this game and win the ACC championship and make the playoff anyway, this game will still stick out, and this will kind of be a stickler in Clemson fans' side.
Oh yeah, for sure.
You have to win this game, and I think you will win this game.
Mm-hmm.
I think with the I do think I respect what Shane Beamer has done at South Carolina. I think bringing back Spencer Rattler can only help them. I do think there are some deficiencies on this roster that I don't think a lot of people are talking about. If you've been paying attention, and I mean, Gamecock fans are aware of it, and I think I think the national media hasn't paid as much attention to it. But this is a team that's returning, I think 7 starters.
Yep.
7 starters. And pretty much most of them are, it's your quarterback, 1 wide receiver.
Yep.
A couple offensive linemen, a couple guys on defense. There is not, there is a lot of question marks for this team.
Yes.
And I think it starts with, the offensive line. I think the running back situation is in a kind of a rough spot. They moved to Kerryon Joyner over at, he was playing wide receiver. He had played quarterback before. Now he's going to be their starting running back. They brought in Mario Anderson from Newberry. And they also, Dontavius Braswell is a true freshman. But beyond, they don't really have any proven guys at running back right now.
No.
They've had some injuries on the offensive line. I think that's a little concerning. And I think they lost some pieces up front on defense. I think I forgot about. I didn't even mention Jaheim Bell. On offense, Jaheim Bell transferring out and Marshawn Lloyd transferring out. They've had some departures in the transfer portal on defense. Jordan Birch and what's the Gilbert Edmonds. They have some question marks. I think they'll be really good at I think they'll still be really good at defensive tackle, defensive back, corner. I think they have some good pieces. Nick Emenwari was one of the best true freshmen in the country last year. They still bring back Marcellus Dial. South Carolina typically is going to be pretty good, in the secondary. They tend to be, but they still have to replace Cam Smith, who was a really good nickel for them last year, and was a fairly high draft pick. But I think there's a lot of question marks on this roster, and I think have they addressed? Are they going to be competent at edge? They haven't been able to stop the run in the past couple of seasons. They couldn't stop the run last year against you. Should have rode that to a win, but I don't want to rehash that.
Yeah, let's
I
not
think
go
you're
into
in,
that.
I think you're in a much better spot from a roster standpoint than, especially on the lines of scrimmage, than South Carolina is. And I
Yep.
think with the question marks about, I didn't even mention the offensive coordinator change with Dowell Loggins coming in. He's kind of an unknown at the college level. There's a lot of question marks with the South Carolina team. And
Yes.
again, it's hard to doubt Shane Beamer. This isn't the
For
first
sure.
year his team has had question marks and he's overperformed expectations. So
Every single year.
It would not surprise me if they were still pretty good. But I got to see it. I feel like they're in a tougher spot than they've been. But bringing back Spencer Rattler and Juice Wells, I think they're going to be able to throw the ball. Jalen Brooks, they have some pieces as far as pass catchers are concerned. But I think the supporting cast with that passing game is still a big question mark, and I think that's where you win the game. And I think if you are much more competent on, from a play calling standpoint, from a special teams standpoint, I think you should win this game.
Absolutely.
I'm going to go Clemson. Man, this is kind of interesting. I feel like this is a game I feel like this could be a game similar to the 2021 game where you just kind of lean on the run game. You don't throw it a whole bunch because I think you'll be able to do that.
Yeah.
I'm going to say Clemson 31, South Carolina 17.
Okay. Awesome.
I think you went on that.
Yeah. So, look, the South Carolina game from last year, I'm not going to talk a lot about it. I'm not going to rehash it. But if everybody in the chat knows it, you know it. It was one of the most frustrating games ever to watch as a Clemson fan. It seems like we handed the game away repeatedly over and over again until South Carolina finally somehow figured out a way to win. And I mean no disrespect to South Carolina. They can talk their crap. They are the winners. They have the bragging rights of the state and all that nonsense until we play again this November. However, we gave them that game. We should not have lost that game. And it was 100% coaching and poor decisions that handed South Carolina that game. That's what it was. Simply put, our coaching staff, handed South Carolina a victory when they did not deserve a victory. And that's one of the games that still haunts me to this day as probably one of the biggest ones in the past two seasons when Clemson has gone regressed, according to most people in college football, most national types in college football, right? The regression of Clemson over the past two seasons, especially on offense, right? With all of that said, that's short order. That's going to change this season. I think our defense is much improved this year, especially in the secondary. I think our secondary gets a lot better. I'm telling you right now, Xavier Thomas is going to be a problem this season. We are going to see remnants of freshman Xavier Thomas when he was behind that beastly defensive line and he just came in to hit the quarterback every once in a while, right? Everybody goes back to that infamous Syracuse hit that he did, right? He's going to be a problem, and I can't wait to watch it. And by the time that this South Carolina game happens, this Clemson team is going to be so much different than the team that lines up against Duke in week one here in 11 days on Labor Day night. Right? It's going to be a completely different team. This offense is going to be experienced. This offense is going to be gelled together. These receivers are going to have experience. These receivers are going to be confident. Hopefully, we have avoided the injury bug that we have not been able to avoid the past two seasons. And if all that comes into play, this game is going to be a revenge game of all revenge games. Starting with the man at the top, Dabo Swinney. I think deep down he knows that decisions made by him and the rest of his coaching staff directly correlated in a South Carolina victory last year. Now, will he ever say that to the media? No. Why would he? But if you put some truth serum in him and you asked him that question, I guarantee you he would say yes. Just like he completely changed the offensive philosophy last season after repeatedly saying that it was fine all season, right? Until it was time to make a change, and then he did, right? So South Carolina's not going to compete. They're not going to get it done. We're going to go into Willie B. I'm predicting 38-3 victory for the Clemson Tigers. Phil Maffa, Will Shipley, that offensive line absolutely put that defense on roller skates. And then Cade Klubnik picks his spots and his pieces when he wants to throw the ball. But I want to see Clemson go out there, and physically dominate South Carolina to atone for last season when we should have just went downhill, run the football. I think that's what we should do this season. Hopefully, it'll happen. It'll make me feel better anyway, if nothing else. But I got our Clemson Tigers going 12-0. That's a pretty hard prediction for me to do because I realize in college football, literally week to week, anything can happen, right? It's extremely difficult for a team to go 12-0. I just can't bring myself to pick Clemson losing any of these games. Maybe my opinion changes. If I had to pick one, honestly, I think Notre Dame's the biggest test of the season for the Clemson Tigers. I really do. And I know people would circle Florida State. I don't think so, man. I think it's Notre Dame. I'm with you. If I saw Clemson going 11-1, the Notre Dame game is the game I would circle to be that huge question mark. But outside of that, the reason that I'm picking this Clemson Tiger team to go 12-0 is one, all the changes that have been done this offseason, starting with Garrett Riley, with Cade Klubnik at quarterback. But I'm way more confident today in this team than I was before we started fall camp. And the reason being is just the rhetoric coming out of these Clemson players. And it's not just one player, it's every player that steps up to that podium. They seem to know exactly what they want this season. They seem to be laser focused, and there's competitiveness coming out of practice. There's these young guys being talked about very highly and pushing the older guys to step their game up and be better and protect their positions, right? And I think just the competitiveness of this team that we've heard in fall camp, I think the confidence that is just oozing out of this team and this new offensive scheme, I think it's really going to kind of propel this Clemson team back into an ACC championship game and most likely a playoff berth in the last year of the 4-team playoff. That's my prediction for our Clemson Tigers this year.
I love it, man. I love it. And hey, and I'm pretty much right there with you. I mean, I do think this team does have a different mentality. It's hard to go 12-0 against any schedule. It's difficult to go 12-0. Not many teams do it. Whether you're in the ACC, SEC, Pac-12, Big 12, Big 10, wherever you are, it's tough to go 12-0. So
yeah.
And I do think I picked the team that I think Clemson matches up the worst with as far as as far as a matchup standpoint. I think Notre Dame is the worst matchup on the schedule for Clemson.
Right.
But I do think that 11-1 and it will. Hey, a one-loss Clemson has never been left out of the playoff ever.
Yep.
If you go 11-1, take care of business in the ACC championship game against whoever, I think you'll be in. I do think that's unless somehow 4 other Power 5 champions go undefeated, I think Clemson will get the. Yeah. And I think there are opportunities on this schedule. I think for Clemson to build up their resume. If Notre Dame, if you win the Notre Dame game, obviously that would help. Florida State, living up to the hype, but you beating them helps. I do think a team like North Carolina could still flirt with being a top 25 team. I think South Carolina, depending on how they manage those losses, if you win that game, maybe that ends up being a quality win. Miami, really talented. I mean, you can look up and down the schedule. I think there is a lot of opportunities for Clemson to have some good resume building wins.
Yep.
So even if you drop one, I think you should be in good shape, because when you listen to casuals talk about the ACC, it's like, oh, this is a garbage conference. But really, I think the conference isn't in terrible shape. At least the top, half, 2/3. I think the bottom is really bad, and I think that's kind of what drags it down. I don't think Virginia or Virginia Tech are going to be very good. Georgia Tech was interesting. I think they could be solid. But I think that the problem with the perception of the ACC is they have a lot of above average to good, not a lot of elite, great to elite. And then the bottom is really bad. Boston College, I didn't even mention them. I don't think they're going to be very good. And I think that's kind of what the problem. But you don't play those teams. You really don't play a lot of the bad teams in the ACC. I think you're playing most of the middle to upper tiers of the conference. So I think that helps. And then I think the Notre Dame game and the South Carolina game could be some decent resume builders if you win those games. So
right.
Even if you drop one, I think you'll be in good shape. But it seems like we both think this is a playoff team.
Yeah.
An ACC championship, at least an ACC championship team. And a college football playoff.
I think an 11-1, or at that point it'd be 12-1 ACC championship Clemson team. I don't think that'll ever be left out of the playoffs, including this season, if that prediction comes true. So I don't think we have anything to worry about there at all. It'll all shake out. This Clemson team seems to be different. We seem to be refocused, re-energized. I can't say the same thing heading into last season. This team to me, they just feel different. Again, we'll know how good they actually are within the month of September, right? We'll know before the calendar turns October what this Clemson team will probably be. And to that point, same thing with FSU, right? We're going to know pretty quickly if this FSU team is for real or they're not, or they're just, national media hype and, just living off a big portal class and all that kind of stuff. So we're going to find out a lot in September about both our Clemson Tigers and Florida State, which is what most people have playing for the ACC title this year when it comes to preseason predictions anyway.
Absolutely. All right, man, we have gone for 2 hours and 16 minutes. This is, this has obviously been a bigger show because we went through the whole schedule, and we kind of make this a big mega sort of preview show. Do you want to take some questions from the chat?
Yeah, absolutely.
Roast us, tell us why we're wrong, tell us why this team is going 9-3, or why this team is no doubt a undefeated college football playoff national champion. Whatever you think. Yeah,
get your record predictions in there. Get your questions in there. Whatever you want to talk about. We'll give you guys a couple minutes to get your questions in, and then we'll answer them in order. And if not, we'll pop off of here and hang it up for the night. It's been over a 2-hour show already, so the floor is yours, chat section.
What's up, Byron? He says, "What's up, Tiger, Paul, Craven, and Jordan? Sorry I'm late, but we'll rewatch for sure. Just want to jump in and say what's up and go Tigers." Thank you for joining us, Byron. And yeah, guys, this was a long show, but feel free to you put us on in the car, whatever you do on the rewatch. These are always obviously uploaded, so you can go and watch them. I feel something that I've been thinking about is if one of us ever had the time, it'd be cool if we went back and if we not for any of our previous shows, but moving forward, if we put like timestamps for stuff we talked about, I feel like that would be really
that'd be
good
great
for the listeners if they
That'd
wanted
be
to hear
good.
a specific point. So that might be something I could do.
Yeah,
For this
maybe
one.
we can figure that out. Definitely in the future, and get that out for these guys. And look, if you guys ever watch it on the rewatch or anything like that, make sure to leave us a comment. Ask us a question. Tell us if you think we're right, if you think we're wrong, where we messed up, whatever. Um, I like to try to get in there and respond to your guys' comments. We'll try to interact with you guys as best we can, with our schedule in mind as well. So leave a comment on the rewatches for us as well. We appreciate it.
Let's see. Todd, our resident Gamecock fan, he says, I agree with 11-1. Just switch Notre Dame with USC. What? Clemson doesn't play Southern Cal this year? No, I'm kidding. Yeah, that could happen for sure. I mean, it would be very disappointing if this team lost to South Carolina again, but rivalry game on the road, Williams-Bright Stadium is a pretty, electric atmosphere. But I think Clemson is the better team, and I think the things they were able to do last year, I don't think the explosive pass plays. I don't think this team will be giving up as many of those last year, because that wasn't just something South Carolina exploited. It was other teams did as well. Wake Forest, Tennessee. So some of the other teams on our schedule. I mean, Clemson gave up big plays through the air. I don't think you're going to see that as much this year, and I think that's what South Carolina is going to rely on more, because I don't think they'll be able to run the ball particularly well this year. They're going to throw it around a lot, and I think that seems to be, from everything I've heard out of fall camp, that seems to be their plan. They're going to want to, Spencer. They're going to put a lot more on Spencer Rattler. He's going to throw the ball a lot more. He's going to be making a lot more checks. Is he ready for that? We'll have to see, because there's going to be a lot on his plate as a fifth-year guy. All right. Like Mike, this is off topic. We like getting off topic, so this is cool.
For sure.
Off topic, but have y'all had a chance to watch Be High or Swamp Kings documentaries that came out this week? They are really interesting. I have not seen Be High, but I did see the Swamp Kings documentary. I thought it was interesting. I was kind of disappointed because they labeled it as untold, and I thought we were going to hear about all the behind the scenes and all the controversy about those Florida teams.
They didn't tell you anything you didn't know, huh?
Yeah, they didn't really tell us much that we didn't know. I mean, they didn't. They mentioned Aaron Hernandez's name once. They didn't really talk about the Pouncey twins. They didn't talk about what happened after the 2008 season. Percy Harvin punching his wide receiver coach. All of that. Like, they didn't really talk about much of that. And I was like, okay, that's kind of disappointing. I mean, as a sports doc, I thought it was good. It was well made. I'll say that. Like, it told the on the field story of that team pretty well. Those teams pretty well, but other than that, and I didn't. They kind of sanitized Urban Meyer as a head coach and as a person in some respects, and I didn't really. I thought that was kind of. It was kind of they're trying to. It's kind of a fluff piece, but it was interesting. I was entertained watching it, and I guess that's the point.
Yeah, I haven't got a chance to watch it yet, but I will. I will. I got some time tomorrow that I'll probably fill up with Swamp Kings first. So.
Oh, and so I didn't really spoil. I hope I didn't really spoil it, but
no, you're good. I was gonna watch it anyway, regardless. Yeah. So it doesn't really matter.
Yeah, but they don't really. They kind of glance over the off the field legal issues. They talked about Brandon James and some of the drug, the partying and stuff, but they didn't. They kind of glanced over it, and it was kind of more of a they kind of excused it away, and it was like it wasn't it was just something Urban Meyer just had to manage with that team, when in reality there was some pretty serious stuff going on that was kind
honestly
of go.
I semi expected that because of Urban Meyer being involved in the in the documentary. I don't think he would sign up for a documentary where they're really grilling him or really
Yeah, that's a good point.
trying to go at him and really do, I guess, investigative journalism, and then you know uh, yeah, I don't see him ever going on a documentary where they're going to ask him really the tough questions. They're going to frame it in a way where you know he looks as best as he could. So, but that is disappointing because you want one of those documentaries to really like give you some of those juicy bits, that you that you don't really know about, right? So
Right.
I guess I'm still gonna watch it anyway, but I wish they would, kind of maybe break some news there. Tell us some things that we really didn't know, or more about something that we do know, but just a little bit more in depth about it. But you know, I guess they can only do what people sign off on. So
Yeah, I agree. Back to back to Clemson. Isaac asked, any insight on how good the offense is actually looking versus our defense? So anxious to see it. Yeah, I mean, from everything that we've gathered between practice reports, interviews, all of that,
yep,
stuff that Clemson writers have seen and what they've seen is
mhm,
that there's a pretty stark difference in how competitive the offense has been
right,
against the defense. It's the defense has been guessing more.
hmm,
They haven't been dominating, scrimmages and practices. The Clemson is the offense has hit big plays. They've been tough to stop at times. The defense has had their moments. The defense is really good,
yeah,
and they've certainly had their moments where they were winning that battle. But I think the competitiveness on both sides has been what has stuck out the most. And I think Cade's leadership, his poise, he's made some really, really great throws this camp. He looks in command of the offense, and I think that's something we've been missing. We haven't really, you didn't really hear that from D. You didn't see it. He looks in control and the confidence and all of that and what he's doing. Um,
yeah,
that was just something that was never there. There was just like, oh, he's improved, all of that, blah blah blah. But you never really got the sense that that the team rallied around him and there was the utmost confidence in what they were doing. I think that's the difference that we've seen this offseason and especially in this fall camp they've been acclimated and they
yeah.
kind of understand what they're doing.
And you
Um,
you you hear defense personnel talking about the offense pushing them and making them better, and iron sharpens iron and stuff like that. So you're hearing that out of the players, and then you're hearing reports from practice. One of the ones that I like to hear is Cade getting after offensive linemen and other players about not bringing the right energy to practice, right? Something that we did not have in DJ, right? We didn't have that vocal leader in DJ. No slight against him, just wasn't his style, right? But Cade is that guy that will speak up and be more of a vocal leader, and I think that that bodes well when your quarterback is that guy. So good things coming out of the offense, and the offense has had its moments, and the defense has had its moments, and that's not something that we could say in the past couple years. The defense has kind of dominated the offseason in the past couple years, so
yep,
it's good that they're not dominating. They are still getting their licks in, but it's not every single period they're not winning, which is
yep.
good. That means our offense is progressing and our offense is getting better. So
The hard take gets in and says, I think if you look at the schedule, Clemson should win all the games, and Clemson more than likely will be favored in every game they play. I think that's at least on paper right now, and I think from the betting market's perspective, I think Clemson's going to be a favorite in every game. Um, so that is a very good point. Jordan, do you feel that if Clemson shows up and shows out, would you say that your loss was to keep it realistic? I mean, yeah, because you just even if you're favored in every game, the chances of you winning all of them, the numbers say you won't.
you won't. Yep.
Um, even teams like Georgia and Alabama typically don't have over 50% chances of going undefeated against their schedules. Ohio State, Michigan, they don't have plus 50% chance of winning every game on their schedule because
Mm-hmm.
That's not how probabilities work. I mean,
Right.
it's just tough to go undefeated. The odds say you don't. But I do think that if this team does go undefeated, obviously, that's the hope, and I think this team can do it. It's just about, do they maintain that consistency? Are the teams on their schedule? Do they, are they good or better than what we expect them to be? Are they worse than what they expect to be? There's a lot of things that go into that, but I picked the team that I think Clemson matches up the worst with. I think that's a game that they can absolutely win, but I do think there are some concerns matchup wise, kind of left over from last year that I still need to see some of those things ironed out before I feel good about picking them to win that game. You guys think maybe Dabo may be reeling in Morrison just got in the background just in case we're really good under Riley and he leaves early?
No.
It's hard to speculate on that because I don't really know what the pretenses were, between Dabo and Garrett Riley when he agreed to take the job. Sometimes there's a talk up front about the expectations. It's like, we'd like to have you, at least this many years, and this. I don't know. I don't know if it depends on what Garrett Riley sees this job as. Does he see it as a chance to build something special, or is it this a stopgap year where he can really show off his skills on his own before he gets a head coaching job? He's still really young. Obviously, I think being a head coach is in his future and something he will pursue at some point in the near future. But is it after this season? Well, the bright side, that would suck, but the bright side is that means you had a really good year more than likely on offense.
Right.
So,
I don't think Garrett Riley's going to be at Clemson very long. I really don't. I don't necessarily think he's going to leave after this season, but then again, I wouldn't be surprised if he did. I think he's a guy that has head coaching aspirations. To me, a guy on staff, I would think Kyle Richardson is kind of being groomed as maybe that backup guy in case Riley bolts, because he comes from kind of the same philosophy of offense. So he already understands the offense that Garrett Riley is bringing into Clemson right now. That's kind of his background. He is from that air raid, same type of tree that Garrett Riley's from. That's where Kyle Richardson's from. So if I had to guess, if there was somebody right now in the Clemson coaching staff, whether it be, analysis or on the field coach, I would guess Kyle Richardson would be the guy that's being groomed if Riley leaves.
Yeah, I tend to agree. That's kind of how I feel in that situation. Let's see. Have y'all seen Byron to get to? Have y'all seen that motivation speech that the team had? Yeah, I think it was Eric Thomas. Yeah, that was pretty neat. Dabo spoke as well. He said some pretty interesting stuff. That quote about every class since 2013 has won a national championship. You're on the clock. Like that's something those are the kind of words you don't typically hear from Dabo. It's the Clemson's goals have never win a national championship has not been on one of Clemson's yearly goals
ever.
And I don't think that's what he's saying. I don't think he's saying that's the that's the goal. But I do think he's never emphasized it that way. And he thinks this team. I do think this is he's using it as kind of a motivation tool and kind of a, hey, this the standard that we've set here has been it's different than what we've been doing the past couple of seasons, and it's like it seems like he wants this team to believe that they can do it.
Yeah.
Because that belief may not have been there the past couple of seasons, and I think he sees that. I don't know if he might see a national championship team with this group, but I think in reality he sees a team that has a chance to reach beyond what they've been, and I think that's what he's going for. But yeah, that whole event was really interesting. Eric Thomas is a really good speaker, and
Yeah, he pumped me up, dude.
yeah,
Watching the video. I will say that something that I've mentioned on some past episodes is I don't remember a Clemson team, at least players or anybody really, mentioning national championship quite like this team has during fall camp and the interviews. I mean, these players have not been shy to say that they want to win a national championship and that's their ultimate goal this season, which is not something that you typically hear from a Clemson team. Usually, it's the five goals that Clemson has, right? Win the opener, win the division, win the state, win the conference, and then win the closer, right? Those are kind of Clemson's goals every single season. You don't hear them ever name national title specifically, but obviously, if you reach all those goals and you keep winning, obviously winning the closer is eventually going to be winning the national title. However, a lot of these players, man, talking to the media this fall camp, they're just straight out saying it, dude. They're just like, "Hey, I want to win a national championship this year. This year, we want to leave here with a national championship." And Dabo's even mentioned it a couple times in interviews, which is probably the most surprising thing. And then you heard him allude to it, kind of following up after the motivational speaker that he had on campus. So a little bit of a different approach, I think, from this Clemson team. A little bit of a different, just kind of, I don't know, confidence or swagger or whatever you want to say behind this Clemson team. They're just operating a little bit differently than you've seen maybe Clemson teams in the past operate when it comes to that particular topic.
absolutely. I agree. This team does the mindset shift is a little bit different than it's been in recent years.
Yeah.
Who's the Duke guest going to be next Thursday? Yeah, that's still up in the air. We may have a Duke. We may have a Duke guest on.
We'll try to get one, but no promises.
Yeah,
no promises.
It's hard to there's not many that cover the Duke beat that are easily accessible and not busy, busy.
And one of the problems is, guys, is like our time slot is what it is, right?
Yeah.
So we don't pre-record these shows. They're live shows. We're interacting with you. So if somebody can't make our time slot, it really makes it hard because we're not trying to bounce our show around from time slot to time slot because, then it confuses you guys. You guys don't know when to show up. So we just try to keep it as consistent as we can, which sometimes makes scheduling issues with other YouTubers.
Yeah. WB2DX says, at me, what wide receiver needs to step up this year? I think the obvious choice is Adam Randall. I think I think he immediately raises the ceiling of this wide receiver room.
Yep.
But if you wanted to say, I'd say Bo Collins as well because I think the consistent production. I think he has a chance to be really special in this offense. I think this is,
yes.
I think it's tailor made for his skill sets, and I think he could be really effective and then have his biggest year. So those two, I think those are the guys that really need to be big time, big playmakers for this group. And then obviously we know how good Antonio Williams is making that step up, but from year one to year two is going to be paramount. And then, a lot of the young guys there's a lot of intriguing young guys. We've talked about Cole Turner. We've talked about Tyler Brown is a guy that Dabo has said is pushing Antonio Williams at this point, which is that's scary. I do think Clemson got themselves a good one.
He's being talked about a lot.
Yeah, You're going to see him a lot. And I,
Kind of
I had a
reminds me.
feeling.
Go ahead. You're good.
Yeah, I had a feeling because, and we talked about this even at the beginning of the show. When you take chances on, and I don't even think this was a chance because I think that the staff really liked him, but and he was just a really productive football player in high school. But when you take guys that from within the state, they're local. He played in Greenville, so he only 40 minutes from Clemson. They just tend to work out more often than not. We talked about the list of guys from the state of South Carolina at wide receiver that have come out of this state.
Some of which we quote unquote rolled the dice on, right?
Yeah. Hunter Renfrow was a 2-star, like option quarterback,
Option
from Myrtle
quarterback.
Beach.
Yeah.
Like, Tyler Brown. He's a football player. He is just farther along than people expected.
One of the biggest things that Dabo said about him, and the biggest thing that's going to get him on the field probably, is Dabo said he just knows what to do with the ball in his hands.
Yep.
When somebody's like that, when a player is like that, you get them on the field and you get them the ball any way you can, and then you just let them go to work. Because that's one of those traits in a skill guy that can't necessarily be taught, right? That's just him and his natural instincts out there playing, because he kind of barely knows the playbook at this point. He may have it down a little bit better than he did, but he's a summer enrollee, right? So he hasn't had a ton of time. He's just out there relying on his athleticism, and if he's that good before he really knows this playbook in and out, it bodes well for Clemson.
Yeah, I do. I think there's no reason why this wide receiver room doesn't take a massive jump. I think there are the pieces are there. I don't think this is the most talented Clemson has ever had or anywhere close to it. But I think this group can be a strength for this offense. And with this scheme, there's going to be less of guys relying on their just naturally given traits and athleticism to go up and get 50-50 balls and stuff like that. Guys are going to be schemed open. They're going to be able to get separation. There's going to be versatility and just a flexibility, all of that. There's just going to be more variety in this wide receiver room, and I think that's perfect for what this offense wants to be. So, yeah, I think I feel better about this wide receiver room the more as the days go by. Let's see. I think we'll wind it down. We've already gone so long.
Yes. We're approaching 3 hours at this point, so a couple more questions and then we'll get out of here. Maybe one or two more.
I want to get a really good question. Todd asks about Riley's contract. I don't remember the year. I don't remember the duration. Was it 3 years?
I want to say it's 2 or 3 years. Yeah. I don't really know. I'm just guessing.
Like 3 years, $1.5 million a year.
I don't think it's any more than 3. But I want to say it's between 2 and 3 years. Probably 3, I would assume. I wouldn't think they would just lock him down for 2. But again, contracts are relative in the college football coaching realm. They don't really mean very much.
Yeah.
If he wants to leave, he'll leave.
Oh, WB2 has a question for you. What defensive player do you think needs to step up his game?
I mentioned him earlier, but to me, player number 1 is XT, and he needs to stay healthy because we have a depth issue along the defensive line. We got a guy that we've heard a lot about in Paul Camp and TJ Parker that's been talked about a lot, right? But XT really needs to anchor that group, and he really needs to play with a sense of urgency, and play with a fire this year. And I think he can. I mean, you look at the dude; he looks like an absolute beast. Another guy I think needs to step up, Andrew Makuba. He had kind of a up and down season at best last year. Had some good points, had some really, really, really bad points last year, struggled with injury, but he's a guy that we're really going to need to step up this year and play a lot of snaps, and really get back to his freshman form. And then I guess at the linebacker position, I would say a Wade Woodaz would be super important, especially because of our interior depth at linebacker. He's going to have to develop, and he's going to have to be ready to step in should something happen. And even if something doesn't happen, guys aren't on the field 24/7. They can't take every single snap of every single game the entire season. So he's going to have to get in there and provide quality depth in the interior of that defense, linebacking core, in order for Clemson's defense to be as successful as it's going to be. So just picking a guy at each level of the defense, those are the first guys that come to my mind. XT along the defensive line, Wade Woodaz at linebacker, and then Andrew Makuba kind of in the defensive backfield, safety position.
I think those are great choices. Honestly, hard to pick better ones than that. That's pretty. Yep. All right. I don't think there's much else.
All right.
We'll go ahead and wrap it up then.
Yeah, man. Thank you guys for stopping by. We still got 18 people in here right now. If you had not hit that like button, please hit that like button for us. Subscribe to the channel. Me and Jordan are here every single Thursday, 7 p.m. We'll be here all season to break down the upcoming Clemson game. And then keep in mind, guys, we are going to do a live post-game reaction immediately following every single Clemson game this season. Me and Jordan Bowman will be right here on the Voice of College Football Clemson channel, immediately following every Clemson game. Whatever the time is, we'll be here to talk about it. We appreciate you guys stopping by for the All In Show. We are 11 days away from kickoff. I can't wait. We actually have live football this weekend, Jordan. We got live football. It may be week 0. It may not be the games that we really want. But guess what? It's college football nonetheless, and I couldn't be any more excited.
Me neither, man. Just glad to be here, and now it's just counting down the hours at this point before I get to watch some Notre Dame, Navy, taking the over on Vandy and Hawaii, and doing all sorts of degenerate college football stuff. So
there you go. I like it.
I'm excited. So let's we'll see how it plays out.
Let's do it, man. Until next time, I am Tiger Paul Craven. He is Jordan Bowman. This has been the All In Show here on the Voice of College Football Clemson channel. Please come join us next Thursday, 7 p.m. We'll see you right here.
Later, y'all.